Chapter 1185. The waterfall below gradually stopped flowing. A whirlpool appeared in the center of the blue water. As time passed, the whirlpool gradually expanded and swallowed all the trees in the surroundings silently. At the same time, the dark clouds in the sky seemed to be attracted by some kind of force and started to rotate slowly, forming a huge storm. Between heaven and earth there was darkness. The wind howled and the pressure was heavy. The people waiting on the peaks of the dark feather abyss were all energized. Judging from the situation, the King Yuan artifact was about to appear. When all the water in the water is sucked dry, that will be the time when the King Yuan artifact appears. At that time, we must act quickly and snatch the artifact before anyone else. Elder Shu Feng instructed seriously. Everyone nodded their heads and waited for the battle to begin. Time passed slowly. Under the whirlpool, there seemed to be a black hole that kept swallowing everything around it. The storm in the sky also gradually came down. Countless pairs of eyes stared at this scene. At a certain moment, just as the whirlpool was about to disappear, the storm hit. The two collided. Boom. A loud sound came from within. The next moment, a dazzling light burst out from within. Now, Elder Shu Feng gave the order and took the lead to charge out. The people behind him also moved out. At the same time, the people waiting at the dark feather abyss all rushed over. Lingxiao College was actually the fastest. Seeing that they were about to take the lead, the others started to panic. The dark-skinned brawny man who spoke earlier suddenly shouted in a deep voice. "Everyone, let's join forces." Elder Shu Feng and the others' hearts sank when they heard this. Sure enough, the man then shouted again, "Hey! This treasure was left behind by the people of the Spirit Firmament Academy back then. If they want to snatch it, it will be much easier for them than for us. Why don't we join forces to defeat them first and then decide who the treasure belongs to?" His voice was deep and full of energy. As soon as he opened his mouth, his voice spread out between the heavens and the earth. Many people hesitated for a moment and looked at each other with complicated expressions. Elder Shu Feng shouted angrily. "Golden Wing Sect! How dare you?" The man laughed out loud. "I've already dared to steal from you in front of you. What's there to be afraid of?" Their Golden Wing Sect was also a first-rate sect in the Divine Ruins world. Moreover, they had a deep foundation and were full of confidence. Lingxiao College had a prestigious status, but it was just a college after all. It was true that there were many experts, but it was still different from the orthodox sects and aristocratic families. After all, it was impossible for Lingxiao College to have all the elders and students risk their lives for the school. Moreover, even though the treasure that had appeared today was a rarely seen king-grade origin tool, it definitely wasn't enough for Lingxiao College to fall out with everyone because of it. That was why they dared to snatch it so brazenly. In addition, there were other people present, so they were even more unscrupulous. "Everyone, what are you hesitating for? Since you're already here, do you intend to watch the treasure fall into the hands of others?" This sentence finally made the people from the other sects and clans make up their minds. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. Those who had originally planned to charge toward the center had all turned around and were heading toward the people from Lingxiao College. Other than Lingxiao College, there was also the Four Directions sect here. Their numbers added up to almost 180 people, which was several times more than Lingxiao Academy's side. Even if the people from Lingxiao College were all quite strong, they wouldn't be able to withstand the siege of so many people. After all, if they dared to openly oppose them, their strength wouldn't be too weak. If they were to fight against them, they would definitely lose today's battle. Several groups of people surrounded the Spirit Firmament Academy, trapping them within. Elder Shu Feng's mind raced as he looked at Rongxiu. "Rongxiu, we'll hold them back. Find an opportunity to retrieve that item." Rongxiu nodded slightly. "Huh? Do you think it's that easy to dodge?" The man sneered and charged toward Rongxiu. "I'll take you on first." Rongxiu raised his eyes slightly. His expression was cold, and there was no emotion in the depths of his eyes. In the next moment, his figure suddenly vanished on the spot. What? Not only the man who was about to fight Rongxiu, but also the other people who were watching were all shocked. They weren't shocked that Rongxiu knew how to teleport, but they were shocked that he could still move so easily and freely under such strong suppression. There were quite a number of great gods present. Even if they were all great gods, they might not be able to escape so quickly. The next moment, Rongxiu appeared behind the crowd. He was only a short distance away from the dazzling ball of light. The man from the Golden Wing Sect was the first to react. He shouted, "Stop him." Elder Shu Feng ordered, "Let's go." Go. The two sides clashed and quickly descended into a chaotic battle. A few cold gusts of wind came from behind, but Rongxiu did not turn around. He quickly dodged them and easily avoided them. In the blink of an eye, he was already at the location of the storm. Standing there, everything was presented clearly in front of his eyes. The water from before had disappeared, and there was only a huge black vortex spinning slowly above the swamp-like wetland. It was dark and bottomless. Looking down from above, it looked like a giant beast with its bloody mouth wide open. Once one fell into it, endless torture and death awaited them. At this moment, the storm formed by the gathering dark clouds in the sky had already connected with the vortex. The grayish-black storm was also gradually being swallowed by the black hole. At the point where the two connected, there was a ball of light that was emitting a dazzling light. It was only the size of a person's head, and its light was soft and bright. It was exuding a vast and divine aura. Rongxiu stared at it, and a look of surprise flashed across his eyes. This aura? It doesn't seem to be a king-grade yuan device. Die. Rongxiu's momentary daze gave the people behind him an opportunity to attack. The difference in numbers was too great. Even though the people from Wuxia College had already done their best, they were gradually at a disadvantage. Some people took the opportunity to break through their defense line and went straight for Rongxiu. Sensing the cold aura behind him, Rongxiu's expression turned cold, and a murderous intent flashed across his eyes. He did not turn around. He only raised his hand and waved it. A golden light flew out. It formed an extremely sturdy barrier around him. The muscular man who was originally confident of victory suddenly changed his expression. "You." At this moment, Rongxiu had already rushed forward and grabbed the ball of light. Elder Shu Feng could not fight against four hands with two fists, and he spat out a mouthful of blood. However, he immediately noticed the commotion on Rongxiu's side, and he couldn't help but be elated. He endured the bloody smell in his mouth and hollered, "Activate the formation." Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 1186. The elders at the side moved simultaneously. Chi-chi. Rays of brilliant light flew out and intertwined in mid-air. In the blink of an eye, they formed a huge Shen formation. A faint suppressive aura spread out from it. The surrounding space was distorted, and several black spatial cracks appeared. "They're leaving." Suddenly, someone exclaimed loudly. The man from the Golden Wing sect looked at Rongxiu with anger and jealousy. However, for some reason he did not move forward as if he was afraid of something. Hearing that shout, he hesitated for a moment and turned around. Destroy their Shen formation. Everyone knew that once the Shen formation was completed, the people from Wuxia College would be able to escape quickly. At that time, it would be even more difficult for them to stop them. Everyone attacked together. Elder Shu Feng and the rest did not care about their own safety and increased the speed of building the Shen formation. The Shen formation was complicated and beautiful. As the patterns on it were completed, the aura on it became stronger. "I'd like to see how you're going to go back today." With a low shout, the man from the Golden Wing sect suddenly leaped up. He held a huge black axe in his hand and slashed it down fiercely. Crack. A crack appeared on the Shen formation. Terrifying energy surged out from the crack. It scattered in all directions. The faces of Elder Shu Feng and the others turned pale. If the Shen formation was destroyed, they would not be able to rush back to the academy in time. With so many people attacking them, they would definitely be defeated. He was furious and looked at the man. "Jinlei, do you really want to go against Wuxia College?" Jinlei laughed. "Elder Shu Feng, please don't misunderstand. At the end of the day, all we want is that King Source tool. As long as you hand it over, I promise to let you go immediately. Furthermore, I'll personally come and apologize to you on another day." Elder Shu Feng was so angry that he laughed. "This thing originally belonged to Wuxia College. You've gone overboard by snatching it so brazenly. Do you still want us to hand it over?" 1,000 years have passed. Jinlei interrupted him with an arrogant look on his face. "This thing was not refined in your Spirit Firmament Academy. Even the weapon refining king from back then had fallen here. Not even his bones were left. Then, how can this treasure belong to your academy? Since it's an ownerless item, what's wrong with us snatching it?" "You're being unreasonable," Elder Shu shouted. "Stabilize the Shen formation." Jinlei raised the axe in his hand again. "Everyone lend me a hand." There was already a crack in the Shen formation. If there was another crack, it would definitely collapse completely. The others also seemed to have seen a glimmer of hope. They all revealed excited expressions and poured their origin power into the axes. A terrifying power surged forth. Heaven and earth. The sweet and fishy taste in Elder Estranged Wind's mouth became even thicker. The rest of the people's Lingxiao College. Right at this moment, a golden streak of light flew over. Of the Xian were of the sun, following this buzzing sound, the Xian formation that was on the verge of collapse quickly recovered. The golden light also quickly split into many small branches that spread to the surroundings. In an instant, it covered more than half of the Xian formation. Seeing this scene, even the people from the Spirit Firmament Academy were shocked. Rong Xiu had dabbled in Xian masters, but he had always been outstanding as a martial artist and an instrument refiner. Therefore, everyone had always thought that although his comprehension of Xian masters was also very good, it could not be compared to his other two talents. But now they realized that Rong Xiu had already become a top-notch expert in Xian masters. This Xian formation was successfully constructed with the combined efforts of so many people. Rong Xiu had actually repaired the Xian formation that was on the verge of collapse with his own strength and completed the remaining parts. Wei Shiping looked at the man who was floating in midair with his clothes fluttering in the wind. His white clothes fluttered like an immortal, but he was so powerful that people could only look up to him. Rong Xiu, was the gap between them already so big? He clenched his teeth and lowered his eyes to hide the unwillingness and jealousy that flashed across his eyes. At this moment, the Xian formation was finally completed. Elder Shu Feng immediately shouted, "Open!" Following his command, a huge crack suddenly appeared in the sky above the brilliant Xian formation. "Rong Xiu, let's go!" Elder Shu Feng anxiously shouted. Rong Xiu took a step forward, and his figure quickly disappeared into the crack. Then the Lingxiao College students followed suit. Seeing them leave one by one, Jin Lei could not help but grip the axe in his hand tightly and was about to rush forward. "Chase!" The people behind him hurriedly dissuaded him. "No. This Xian formation has torn space. The other end must be Lingxiao College. We can't go there." "That's right. We can still fight them here, but if we go to their territory, I'm afraid." Everyone was discussing and expressing their opposition. Jin Lei's face darkened. If they let them leave with the Emperor-grade Yuan tool, they would not be willing to do so. There's a special barrier outside Lingxiao College. It's heavily guarded, and no one is allowed to enter or leave as they wish. I'm guessing that they're going to return to Fangzhou first. As long as they can make it in time, it's not impossible. He looked around and scanned the crowd with his cold eyes. Suddenly he sneered. "Have you forgotten? That's a Emperor-grade Yuan tool. Since we've already offended Lingxiao College, what's the difference?" His words made many people waver. After all, the Emperor-grade Yuan tool was too tempting. "Look, that Xian formation doesn't seem to be closed properly." Someone suddenly cried out in alarm. Everyone, including Jin Lei, looked over and saw that the crack suddenly paused just as it was about to close. Jin Lei did not hesitate at all. In a flash he followed the person. Naturally, the people from Golden Wing sect followed closely behind. The remaining people looked at each other and hesitated for a moment. A middle-aged man suddenly shouted, "Let's go. We've already offended them. If we give up now, we'll be giving the treasure to Golden Wing sect for nothing." After saying that, he immediately moved. Everyone was already tempted. After hearing what he said, they no longer hesitated and rushed forward. Lingxiao College. Chu Luiyue was refining pills halfway up the mountain. Elder Wanzheng was standing beside him. The surroundings were quiet and the atmosphere was tense. Chu Luiyue's previous 2 attempts had failed. This was already his 3rd attempt. However, Elder Wanzheng was not too worried. It was not easy to break through from an 8th-grade celestial physician to a 9th-grade celestial physician. If Chu Luiyue succeeded on his first try, it would be too strange. The process was very smooth and he was about to reach the final step. Chu Luiyue held his breath and controlled the flames in the cauldron to fuse all the herbs together. Boom. The flames burned even more fiercely. However, at this moment, Elder Wanzheng's expression suddenly changed. He turned around and looked in the direction of the entrance of the college. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 1187. There was quite a distance between here and there, but Elder Wanzheng was still sensitive enough to detect a dangerous aura. His brows furrowed tightly and he was about to leave. But after taking half a step, he suddenly remembered that Chu Luiyue was refining pills beside him. He forcefully suppressed the waves in his heart. After thinking about it, he still decided to stay here and wait for Chu Luiyue to finish refining the pills. Even if the academy was really in danger, there were other elders around. It wouldn't hurt to be a little late. On the other hand, Chu Luiyue was at the crucial moment of refining the pills. It wouldn't be good if they were to interrupt her. Chu Luiyue also realized that something was wrong with him. She turned her gaze and looked at him. His face was filled with anticipation and excitement, but now it was filled with nervousness and worry. Her heart also sank slightly. Master, what's wrong? Elder Wanzheng quickly shook his head. Nothing. Just concentrate on refining the pills. Master is here to help you. Don't be distracted. It's almost done. Chu Luiyue didn't believe him. She had been in the academy for quite some time, but she had never seen Elder Wanzheng with such an expression. She wanted to ask again, but after thinking about it, she held back and put her attention back on refining the pills. In the flames, a fist-sized pill had already appeared. Feeling the power contained in it, Chu Luiyue was slightly relieved. This time she might really succeed. Although she was a 9th-grade celestial physician, she couldn't help but feel excited and happy to be able to climb up this ladder after her rebirth. Every day since she was reborn, she hoped that she could return to her peak and even become stronger. She didn't expect that the first to succeed would be a celestial physician. She held her breath and became more careful. Elder Wanzheng, who was at the side, still couldn't completely relax. From time to time he would look in that direction. The academy's operation this time was confidential. Even some elders weren't clear about it. It showed how important this matter was to everyone. Calculating the time, they had been gone for more than 20 days. It was normal for them to return at this time. But that fluctuation, it was obviously strange and uneasy. Whoosh, whoosh. In midair, several figures flashed past. Those were obviously the elders who had sensed that something was wrong and hurried over. Elder Wanzheng slowly clenched his fists. Chu Luiyue frowned slightly. She originally also wanted to concentrate on refining pills, but that subtle change in aura on Elder Wanzheng's body seriously made her unable to ignore it. She stared intently at the pill in the cauldron, carefully controlling the flame to condense it, and said, "Master, if there's really something urgent, you can go first. Anyway, I'm almost done here." "That won't do. I want to see it personally." "You don't have to care about those things, just focus on refining pills." Elder Wanzheng was very insistent. Chu Luiyue had no choice but to swallow the rest of his words. However, he was getting more and more curious. For Elder Wanzheng to be so worried, it must not be a small matter. Just now, a few elders had already flown over the sky. It seemed like they were heading towards the entrance of the academy? Could it be that someone had barged in to cause trouble? However, as soon as this thought appeared, it was dispelled by Chu Luiyue. This was Lingxiao College. Who would have the guts to cause trouble here? Wouldn't that be causing trouble for themselves? The red flame continued to burn, and the pill in it gradually condensed. A medicinal fragrance wafted from it. Elder Wanzheng's eyes lit up. He could not help but take a step forward and clasped his hands tightly in front of him. Was this about to succeed? Whoosh! Another silhouette flew across the sky. Elder Wanzheng instantly felt as if he had been hit by a bucket of cold water. It seemed that the situation was worse than expected. His brows were tightly knitted together as he stared at Chu Luiyue and the pill in front of her. He did not blink and his heart was beating rapidly. At this moment, time seemed to pass exceptionally slowly. The medicinal fragrance of the pill was getting stronger. Chu Luiyue held her breath and activated the force in her body. It transformed into flames and surged out crazily. Buzz! A strong wave of energy circulated in the cauldron. Chu Luiyue's heart calmed down. The pill was about to be formed. She slammed her hand on the cauldron. The flame exploded. The pill in the middle became rounder and rounder. Lines and lines began to appear clearly on the surface. Chu Luiyue's lips were already a little pale. To the current her, it was indeed a little difficult to concoct a 9th-grade medicinal pill. After this round of refining, she had basically used up all her strength. In addition, she had already failed twice before, so she had even less energy left. Therefore, this pill was really hard to come by. Waves of weakness assaulted her, almost making her legs go soft. She bit the tip of her tongue and used the sharp pain to force herself to be clear-headed. The faint smell of blood spread between her lips and teeth. However, Chu Luiyue did not care about that at this moment. As long as she could successfully refine the pill, Elder Wanzheng's promise would be fulfilled. Thinking of this, she used all her strength to send the last bit of strength in her body into the cauldron and merged it with the flame. Whoosh! The pill suddenly flew up. It seemed to want to escape. Chu Luiyue clenched her teeth and controlled it. As long as she could hold on a little longer, this pill would... "Wanzheng, why are you still here? Fangzhou is already in a mess." An anxious voice suddenly sounded. It was Elder Hua Feng who had rushed over. "That thing is now on Rongxiu and it's being besieged by them." Bang! An explosive sound came from Chu Liyue's cauldron. Black ashes scattered in all directions. A thick burnt smell filled the air. Chu Liyue's pill was destroyed. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 1188. This explosion successfully attracted Elder Huafeng's attention to Chu Liyue's existence. The main reason was that things happened too quickly. He was so anxious that he directly spoke when he saw Elder Wanzheng. He didn't see that Chu Liyue was beside him. The scene fell silent. Only the smell of burnt flesh spread out, indicating what had just happened. Chu Liyue looked at the extinguished medicinal cauldron in front of her with a heavy gaze. The inside and the edges were all black. Just a step away, even the lines on the cauldron were about to be drawn. Her hands slowly clenched. The atmosphere became tense and subtle. Only then did Elder Huafeng realize that he seemed to have done something wrong. He opened his mouth and looked at Elder Wanzheng nervously. "Oh, did I come at the wrong time?" Elder Wanzheng glanced at him faintly. Was there a need to ask? That kid was about to succeed just now. He had been suppressing himself and patiently waiting for Chuyu to successfully refine a 9th-grade medicinal pill. But now, all his efforts were in vain. Chuyu, Elder Huafeng also felt a little embarrassed. Just as he was about to explain, he saw that the young man had already turned around. His usually delicate and gentle face no longer had the usual smile. Instead, there was an inexplicable coldness. "Elder Huafeng," the young man said coldly. Elder Huafeng's heart trembled inexplicably as he subconsciously responded. "Sigh. You just said that Fangzhou is in chaos? Rongxiu. Senior brother Rongxiu and the others are being besieged?" "Yes." "Why do you ask this?" Elder Huafeng originally thought that she was angry because the pill was destroyed and wanted to argue with him. He didn't expect that she would ask this question. He didn't think much and nodded. But after saying that, he thought that it wasn't good to let the students know about this matter, so he added, "But don't worry, we're going over now. There won't be any big problems." As he said that, he looked at Elder Wanzheng and gave him a look. Elder Wanzheng sighed in his heart. "Chiyu, you go back first. As for the matters outside, we will take care of them." Chu Liyue narrowed his eyes. If the matter could be resolved so easily, Elder Huafeng wouldn't have been so nervous when he came, and he wouldn't have said such words. Now all these were just to comfort her. However, she did not reveal these thoughts. She only pretended to believe him and let out a sigh of relief. "That's good. I thought. Actually, Master wanted to leave just now, but I was delayed because I was refining pills." She looked at Elder Wanzheng. "Master, you should hurry up and take a look with Elder Huafeng." Elder Wanzheng sighed. "All right. It's a pity that your pill today could have been completed." Chu Liyue smiled. "This student has already grasped the knack of it. Sooner or later I will succeed. You don't have to worry." "But your previous promise still stands, right?" Elder Wanzheng saw that she had a good attitude and didn't blame the heavens for this failure. He was even more impressed. "Of course it still counts. Moreover, Elder Huafeng is partly responsible for today's matter. In the future he will give you some points as compensation." Elder Huafeng didn't know what the master and disciple were up to, but it seemed to be just giving points. It wasn't a big deal, so he immediately agreed. "That's right. I will definitely compensate you when I come back." The smile on Chu Liyue's lips deepened as she bowed respectfully. "Then this student won't delay Master any longer. I will take my leave first." Elder Wanzheng thought that she wanted to go back and think about refining pills, so he agreed directly. Thinking that there were still some troublesome matters outside that had not been dealt with, the two elders quickly left. Soon only Chu Liyue was left on the mountain. When the two elders disappeared, the smile on Chu Liyue's face gradually disappeared. There seemed to be a dark tide surging in her black jade-like eyes. Fangzhou City? Someone actually dared to come here and look for trouble with Lingxiao College? The key was, what is that thing? Because it was on Rongxiu, so Rongxiu's situation wasn't optimistic? She turned around and walked down the mountain. Fangzhou. In midair, several groups of people were in a stalemate. Rongxiu stood in the middle, surrounded by people from the Golden Wing sect and other sections. On the outer layer there was Elder Xu Feng and the others, as well as the people from Lingxiao College who were rushing over. And at this time the number of people was still increasing. In the city below, countless people raised their heads to watch, their hearts and minds trembling. Who would have thought that they would be able to see such a scene in Fangzhou City outside Lingxiao College? Those people in the sky were all experts from the top sects in the Divine Ruins world. And now the focus of their battle was obviously Rongxiu. Elder Shu Feng and the others had ugly expressions. According to the previous plan, as long as they activated the Shen formation, they could directly create a teleportation array and return to the college directly. They didn't expect these people to follow them here like maggots. Jin Lei and the others were not in a good mood either. They wanted to take down Rongxiu in Fangzhou City as soon as possible and take back the thing. Who knew that Rongxiu's fighting strength was so strong that he had dragged it out until now? More and more people came out of Lingxiao College and gathered here. If this continued, their situation would only get worse. They had to end the battle quickly. But both sides were afraid, so they were in an awkward situation. Finally, Jin Lei raised the axe in his hand and thunder roared under his feet. He went straight for Rongxiu. Everyone attacked together. Finish him. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 1189. Inside Lingxiao College, many elders gathered together and headed to Fangzhou together. The atmosphere in the entire academy quietly became tense. When Chu Luiyue rushed to the entrance of the college, she saw that many students had already gathered around the Qingming Square. Obviously, they already knew that something was going on outside. Chu Luiyue slowed down her footsteps and blended into the crowd, so she didn't stand out. Many students were whispering to each other. Have you heard? Something seems to have happened outside. Someone seems to have come to Fangzhou to cause trouble? I heard that Elder Shu Feng and the others are now fighting with them outside. Some of the elders in the college have also rushed over. Who exactly is it that has the guts to actually barge into our academy? It seems that there are people from the Golden Wing sect. They have never interacted with our college and are extremely arrogant just because they are powerful. And this time, it seems that they are trying to steal something. Other than that, a few other sects have joined forces. Even if they want to steal something, they don't have to kill their way here, right? Aren't they just looking for trouble? Do they really think that our college is a pushover? It seems that they are after an extremely precious treasure. Previously, senior brother Rongxiu and the others came back to retrieve this item for the college. Just now, I accidentally heard an elder say that because of this item, senior brother Rongxiu was besieged by them. I don't know how he is now. After all, they're just outside our college. We can't really let them succeed, right? All kinds of discussions entered Chu Luiyue's ears, causing her to become more and more agitated. Her brows were tightly knitted together. It turned out that Lingxiao College had sent a letter to Rongxiu to talk about this matter. Rongxiu had never mentioned it, so she didn't ask in detail. After all, there were so many people moving together and there were many elders in the college. Logically speaking, there shouldn't be any danger. But now, Rongxiu was clearly in danger. Her heart was filled with anxiety, but she could only console herself. After all, they had already arrived at Fangzhou City, right next to the academy. Even if they really encountered danger, they would still have the support of so many elders from the academy. Since Elder Hua Feng and the others had already rushed over, they should be able to make it in time. More and more students gathered around. The originally quiet Qingming Square became noisy. Chu Luiyue calmly walked in that direction while thinking about how to quietly go out and take a look. Although the academy's barrier was heavily guarded, knowing that Rongxiu was in danger, she couldn't help but worry. Chuyu? A familiar voice came from the side. Chu Luiyue frowned and stood still. When he raised his head, his expression had returned to normal. Zhuoxing Shishir, why are you here? In addition to these two people, Luo Yanming was also beside them. The cultivation of these three people was different, so it was rare to see them together. Zhuoxing winked. Why do you think we're here? Of course it's the same as you. Luo Shishir patiently explained. We were originally cultivating with Master, but something happened at the last minute. Master left, so we came here. We just happened to meet fifth brother. The master she was talking about was Elder Wensi. Chu Luiyue nodded. I was refining medicine just now, and Elder Hua Feng came over and called Master to leave together. In fact, many students were in this situation. Therefore, Luo Shishir and the others didn't think much of Chu Luiyue's explanation. Did you hear what those people said just now? Zhuoxing asked mysteriously. How dare they chase us to Fangzhou to rob us? Are they crazy? Luo Yanming, who had been silent, suddenly spoke. The Golden Wing sect is tyrannical. Although they are also a first-class family, their inherited cultivation method is very domineering. In the sect, from the sect master to the disciples, their combat strength is extremely strong, so they have always been very arrogant. It's not surprising that they would do such a thing. People die for wealth and birds die for food. The item that could make Lingxiao College send out so many elders and students was definitely not an ordinary item. It was obvious that it would arouse the jealousy of outsiders. Moreover, the other party seemed to be the joint forces of several sects, so they were naturally not afraid. As long as they finish the battle quickly and don't stay here for too long, it won't be a big problem. Zhuosheng looked at him strangely. Yanming, how do you know so much? Luo Yanming was silent for a moment. Master said a few more words before he left. Elder Hua Feng had a carefree personality. After hearing the news, he was very shocked and didn't bother to hide it. As he spoke, Luo Yanming and the others beside him heard most of it. The few of them, Chu Luiyue recalled the situation just now and mourned for the 9th grade pill that he should have successfully refined. Elder Hua Feng is sometimes in a hurry. Dong. A low and melodious sound of a bell rang out. It came from the Donghuang bell tower. The square quickly quietened down and everyone looked up. Elder Bo Yin stood upstairs with one hand behind his back. His hair was white and his expression was calm. There's a small accident outside the school, but it will be resolved soon. Everyone go back first and cultivate in peace. A deep and powerful voice spread out majestically. It was gentle and clear in everyone's ears, making them unconsciously calm down. Originally, some of the students were still worried and uneasy, but after hearing Elder Bo Yan's words, they gradually calmed down. Actually, thinking about it carefully, this was Lingxiao College's territory after all. Could they really let outsiders come and behave atrociously? The elders had seen all kinds of storms and waves, so it was naturally not a problem for them to deal with these problems. However, at this moment, a woman's voice suddenly sounded from the crowd. Elder Bo Yin, as a member of the school, the safety of the school is closely related to us. Therefore, Ziyuan requests to go out and fight. In the quiet square, this voice was particularly abrupt, and everyone heard it clearly. Countless pairs of eyes looked towards the source of the voice. It was the person standing behind the crowd, Jiang Jiwan. At that moment, Liang Xiaoxiao and the others were standing behind her. However, the words that came out of her mouth still attracted everyone's attention. Elder Bo Yin smiled. I've already said that there's only a small problem. The school has already sent out a few elders to deal with it. You can just stay in the school without worry. Jiang Jiwan pursed her lips, and her face was full of worry. But Senior Rong Xiu, Chu Luiyue raised her eyebrows. She, the official princess consort, had yet to speak, but Jiang Jiwan was so proactive. She really didn't know whether to praise her for her perseverance or for her stubbornness. Jiang Jiwan's behavior might be seen as infatuation in some people's eyes, but in Elder Bo Yan's eyes, it was a little immature. His expression was a little cold and he asked indifferently, "Are you doubting Rong Xiu's ability, or doubting the abilities of the elders in the school?" Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 1190. His words woke her up from her daze. Jiang Jiwan originally wanted to fight for a chance to go out, even if it was just to show her face in front of Rong Xiu, to let him know that she was willing to sacrifice everything for him. But now that Elder Bo Yin had spoken, she suddenly realized how stupid she was to say such words in front of everyone. I didn't mean that, she was a little flustered and hurriedly explained. I'm just worried about Senior Rong Xiu. Rong Xiu's talent and ability is the best in Lingxiao College, and now he is the holy son of Yintian Tower. Don't tell me that his ability to protect himself is not as good as yours, and you need to worry about him? Elder Bo Yan's tone was calm, but his words made Jiang Jiwan even more embarrassed. The square was silent. Everyone's gaze towards Jiang Jiwan also became complicated. That's right. Elder Bo Yan's words were not without reason. The situation outside was indeed dangerous, but many of the elders in the Lingxiao College had already been mobilized, and they could not allow those people to behave atrociously in the Lingxiao College. Furthermore, Rong Xiu himself was the first on the Green Cloud Roll of Honor, and she was only a demigod. What was the use of worrying here? Even if she went, she would only be adding to the trouble and become a burden to everyone. Since that was the case, then her words were exceptionally. Someone wants to put on a show of being infatuated in front of everyone, but she has to see if she has the qualifications and ability. Someone from the crowd sneered. Jiang Jiwan's face instantly turned red and white. She quickly raised her head to look, trying to identify who said that. But there were many people in the square, and the voice was unfamiliar, so she could not recognize who said that. She bit her lips tightly, her face full of grievance. In the past, when she showed such an expression, she would receive a lot of love and sympathy. But this time it did not seem to be of any use. When the Lingxiao College was in trouble, everyone's first thought was the Lingxiao College and not her. Jiang Jiwan's actions were obviously for her own benefit, so everyone did not think much of it and even felt disgusted. Exactly. Elder Bo Yen had already told everyone to go back and wait patiently, but she insisted on going. What could she do there? Was he sending himself to death? I think she thinks too highly of herself, doesn't she? She was worried about senior brother Rongxiu. What was her status? Actually, I'm also very worried about senior Rongxiu. However, I know what I'm capable of. I won't cause trouble for senior brother and the elders at this time. The mocking words were like steel needles piercing into Jiang Jiwon's heart, tearing her self-esteem and face to shreds. He threw them on the ground and trampled on them. She had always been favored by the heavens. No matter where she was always the most pampered and proud existence among the crowd. But now those people looked at her as if they were looking at a joke. Jiang Jiwon's limbs felt weak. She couldn't understand. She had only said a few words and didn't do anything wrong. Why did it suddenly become like this? Elder Bo Yen looked at her pale face and her dispirited look and shook his head. I heard from your master that you're about to break through. Cultivate well in this period of time. These words gave Jiang Jiwon a way out. She bit her lips and forced herself to reply, then quickly turned and left. That proud head that was always held high finally drooped down at this moment, and the figure of his back revealed a bit of panic and embarrassment. Liang Xiaoxiao and the others exchanged glances with each other. Their faces were filled with awkwardness and they quickly left together. After this brief interlude, many people in the square felt a little more relaxed. Seeing Elder Bo Yan's meaning, there shouldn't be any problems. Hence, under Elder Bo Yan's urging, the gathered students quickly dispersed. Let's go back first. Zhuoxing moved his arms. Sure, I didn't quite understand what Master taught me just now. Why don't you spar with me later and help me sort it out? Although his current realm was slightly higher than Luo Shishir's, in reality, Luo Shishir's talent as a martial artist was more outstanding than his. Zhuoxing already knew this, so he often patiently asked Luo Shishir for advice. Luo Shishir nodded. Luo Yanming thought for a while and said, then I'll go back and comprehend the Shen formation first. Although they had just arrived at the academy, they also felt the great pressure of competition here. So even if they were talented and had a good foundation, they didn't dare to relax at all. Chiyu, what about you? The few of them looked at Chu Luiyue. She smiled. Since you're all going back, I'll naturally go back too. The group of people dispersed. Chu Luiyue walked a distance towards the celestial physician, but in the end she didn't go up the mountain. At this time the sky was getting dark and the sun was setting in the west. She chose an extremely secluded spot. After confirming that there was no one around, she raised her wrist. On her snow-white wrist, a peach blossom quietly bloomed. With a thought, her figure quickly disappeared from the spot. Relying on teleportation, Chu Luiyue silently arrived at the edge of the academy's barrier. Probably because the academy's elders had increased their vigilance, the barrier was faintly glowing and it was full of pressure. She held her breath and stared at the barrier. Many thoughts flashed through her mind. Elder Bo Yen was right. Fang State City was just outside the academy, and no one dared to behave atrociously here. The elders had already moved together, and it shouldn't be a problem to deal with those people. Moreover, Rongxiu was indeed powerful. Chu Luiyue had known Rongxiu for so long, but until now she still wasn't sure what realm Rongxiu had reached. Logically speaking, there shouldn't be any problems. Chu Luiyue pursed her lips, and her heart was in a fierce struggle. If she went, she might become a useless burden like Jiang Jiwon. If that was the case, she might as well wait here peacefully. Moreover, the academy's barrier was heavily guarded. It was almost impossible for her to sneak out without attracting anyone's attention. After thinking about it, Chu Luiyue turned around and prepared to go back. However, just as she moved, a wave suddenly came from her dantian. The wave didn't come from the water droplet, but from the black pyramid. An extremely faint golden light seeped out from the 3 cracks. At this moment, for some reason, the black seal actually showed signs of loosening. This was... Chu Luiyue's eyes narrowed. Just as she was thinking about what this meant, a silver light suddenly flashed in front of her. She focused her eyes and saw that the dagger that Rongxiu gave her suddenly flew out by itself. Buzz! The dagger vibrated. The sharp edge of the blade shone with a cold light. Murderous aura overflowed. Chu Luiyue's heart suddenly jumped. Rongxiu, danger. Without thinking, she immediately turned around and ran toward the barrier. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 1191. Chu Luiyue grabbed the dagger and held it tightly in her palm. As such, she could feel the violent tremors even more clearly. Chu Liyue's heart also seemed to be beating faster, as if it was going to jump out of her chest. She quickened her pace and soon felt the pressure from the barrier. The closer she got, the heavier it felt. She was at the foot of a mountain. There were a few huge rocks piled up beside her, and she quickly hid behind them. Because the sky had darkened and this place was desolate to begin with, not many people came and went, so no one noticed her. However, Chu Liyue did not dare to relax. She thought that she knew that the difficulty she had to overcome was not this, but the huge barrier in front of her. What method did he have to use to open the barrier without making a sound? Chu Liyue frowned. Suddenly, a white light flashed in her mind. That's it. Previously, when she first entered the academy and stood outside the barrier, some vague memory fragments flashed through her mind. She did not know who set up a small Shen formation and connected it to the barrier. Then, like a key, it easily opened the barrier. If she could also construct that Shen formation, then, this thought made Chu Liyue restless. She closed her eyes and began to frantically search through that memory fragment. If she remembered correctly, that Shen formation did not seem to be particularly difficult. With her current strength, she might be able to succeed if she put in some effort. However, at that time, the scene had only flashed past her eyes. She hadn't even realized anything before the scene had completely disappeared. Therefore, she only had a vague impression. She did not remember what that Shen formation looked like. And now, what she needed to do was to recall the Shen formation in its entirety and in its entirety. This was easy to say, but when it came to doing it, it was full of difficulties. Her memory was mostly missing, so even she did not know when that memory belonged to, and did not know what happened before and after that. This made it even more difficult for her to recall. She wanted to pick up that vague memory fragment now, but it was like looking for a needle in a haystack. Her surroundings were quiet, and a gentle breeze blew past, blowing the hair on her forehead. She could clearly hear the sound of her heart beating. Countless images flashed through his mind. At this moment, time became extremely difficult to endure. Finally, she recalled the fragment and began to search for the details in her mind. In the blurry image there was still a pair of fair and slender hands. That pair of hands lightly waved in the air, and several streams of light danced, quickly forming a profound formation. In Chu Liyue's eyes, that small Shen formation was actually just a blurry ball of light. She did not give up and patiently watched. The same scene continued to play out. Again and again, over and over again. She even stared at every movement of his hands, not missing a single detail. Finally, the general outline of the profound formation was gradually revealed. She was overjoyed. Originally, she didn't have much hope, but she didn't expect this move to actually work. And it was much faster than she had expected. Gradually, the position of every line on the profound formation was gradually drawn out clearly. This process was actually very strange. It was as if a layer of mist had covered the glass, and nothing could be seen clearly. But when she wiped away the mist bit by bit, everything started to become clear. Everything happened naturally, as if she already knew what the Shen formation was like. Just as this thought surfaced, Chu Liyue's heart suddenly jumped. She almost subconsciously frowned and denied this guess. The reason why she could do it so smoothly was probably because she was a level 9 Shen master in the past, and her comprehension of profound formations had always been very strong. It was normal for her to occasionally master it. Chu Liyue didn't pay too much attention to this matter, and quickly focused all her attention on the profound formation. After a period of time, the last stroke was finally seen clearly. She suddenly opened her eyes. She gently raised her hand and slowly drew in the air. Several streams of light flew out and intertwined in front of her, dazzling and moving. Chu Liyue followed what she had learned before, and followed those steps very strictly, bit by bit. Soon, a rough outline of the profound formation appeared in front of her. But because it was her first time, she wasn't very familiar with many parts, and Chu Liyue's current Shen master rank had yet to recover to level 9, so even though this profound formation was barely outlined, it was still a little rough. But Chu Liyue was already very satisfied with this. She held her breath and focused, staring at the profound formation, and filled in the remaining lines one by one. As the profound formation continued to be perfected, the pressure and aura on it also gradually increased. When she solemnly and carefully drew the last stream of light and completed the profound formation, she didn't even dare to breathe loudly. She tried her best to suppress the excitement in her heart, and looked up to the front. The academy's barrier was only 10 steps away from her. She gently raised her wrist and sent the small profound formation out. At first glance, it looked like a butterfly that was about to take flight, lightly flying over there. It danced lightly in the air. Chu Luiyue held her breath. Thump, thump. Her heart seemed to be tightly clenched by something. It was beating intensely, and the sound was incomparably clear. This short distance actually seemed to be exceptionally long at this moment. Finally, the profound formation flew to the front of the barrier. It was like a thin piece of paper that was gently attached to the barrier. This was the moment. Chu Luiyue suddenly felt that there seemed to be some kind of subtle connection between herself and the barrier. This feeling was not unfamiliar. She pursed her lips and walked forward, landing soundlessly. As she approached, the pressure and power on her body also became more and more terrifying. When she stood in front of it, even her bones faintly hurt. But Chu Luiyue didn't have the heart to care about this at this moment. She stretched out her hand according to the image in her mind. Crack. An extremely soft sound was heard. The huge barrier slowly split open from the middle. This movement was extremely small, and even the barrier beside it wasn't affected at all. It was still as calm as before. Chu Luiyue raised her leg and stepped out. Boom. Chu Luiyue had just walked out of the barrier when she heard a loud sound coming from afar. She suddenly raised her head, and her expression was immediately shocked as her pupils shrank. In the sky far away, hundreds of people were fighting. The sound just now came from there. Forces of various colors flew and collided wildly. It was extremely chaotic. But Chu Luiyue still saw Rong Xiu at a glance. At this moment he seemed to be surrounded and attacked by a group of people. His snow-white brocade robe was already stained with several messy bloodstains. And those people had no intention of letting him go. A sharp arrow suddenly pierced through the air. It went straight for Rong Xiu's back. The peach blossom on Chu Luiyue's wrist bloomed enchantingly. The force around her surged wildly. In the next moment, her figure suddenly disappeared. Chapter 1192. Rong Xiu felt the cold wind coming from behind him. His eyes turned sharp and golden light surged in his palm. Suddenly, he paused and a rare look of surprise flashed across his face. In that moment of hesitation, the sharp arrow had arrived behind him and was about to pierce through his body. Rong Xiu. Elder Xu Feng and the others were shocked when they saw this scene from afar. Their eyes widened, and their faces were filled with shock as they cried out in a deep voice. Get out of the way. How could Rong Xiu be distracted at a time like this? Jin Lei sneered. The corners of his mouth curled up and his eyes were full of mockery. He was almost sure that he would win. Rong Xiu was very good at fighting. Previously they had besieged him but they did not gain any advantage over him. But so what? At this critical moment, there was no room for absent-mindedness or hesitation. The slightest mistake could lead to extremely serious consequences. However, just when he thought that he could wait for Rong Xiu to be injured and defeated, a slender figure suddenly appeared behind Rong Xiu. That person appeared so suddenly that he did not even cause any energy fluctuation. He was already there. Teleportation. When Jin Lei and the others saw this scene, they all had the same thought in their minds. Those who could teleport were at least great deities. However, they had already surrounded Rong Xiu. The elders outside had tried several times but failed to break in. How could this person, clang? A crisp and powerful sound of collision was heard. That person was holding a black sword and had blocked the sharp arrow. Swish. That person raised his wrist slightly and the sharp arrow was deflected. It brushed against the black sword. The sound was ear-piercing. But soon after, that person's black sword quickly slashed down, directly cutting the arrow in half. Crack. Everything happened in an instant. Who is that? Jin Lei and the others tensed up and looked over. However, when they saw that person's face, they were all stunned. That was a young man? It was indeed a young man. He wore a light green brocade robe and his figure was slender and tall. His appearance was delicate and pretty, and there was a hint of youthfulness on his face. He definitely didn't look more than 20 years old. That was a child who didn't seem to be on the same level as them. But at this moment, with the black sword in his hand, he suddenly and swiftly broke through their blockade and appeared behind Rong Xiu, blocking the arrow for him. Almost instantly, everyone understood. He had used some kind of yuan tool that could teleport. There was a moment of silence in the chaotic scene. Chu Luiyue held her sword with both hands. That arrow almost made her hand go numb. If she hadn't been cultivating with Debao all this time and greatly improved her physical strength, she definitely wouldn't have been able to block that move. She could feel countless pairs of incomparably sharp eyes around her, which were like blades scraping her body. Who are you? Jin Lei shouted in a deep voice. He subconsciously wanted to see what realm this person was in, but he was surprised to find that the other party had concealed his aura extremely well. Even he couldn't pry into the young man's true strength. However, to be able to block that arrow, he seemed to be at least a rank 9 martial artist. Facing such a young face, it was really impossible to associate him with a god-level expert. Chu Luiyue turned a deaf ear to his words and only turned her head to look at Rong Xiu. Their gazes met. The surprise and astonishment in Rong Xiu's eyes had all dissipated, leaving only a heavy and indiscernible darkness. Between the ripples there seemed to be an undercurrent surging. Just this one glance was enough. Chu Luiyue heaved a sigh of relief. His complexion and aura looked good, so he shouldn't be too seriously injured. And he seemed to be quite at ease. Her gaze quickly swept past the messy bloodstains on his clothes. Most of them shouldn't belong to him. This made her heart finally calm down, but at the same time, a thought flashed through her mind. Rong Xiu's strength was indeed stronger than she had expected. This man, Chu Yu? Just as the people here fell into a strange silence, the few elders in the distance finally saw Chu Luiyue's face clearly and couldn't help but be shocked. Elder Wanzheng was the most shocked. His face, which had always remained calm even if Mount Tai collapsed in front of him, was now filled with shock. After the shock it was anger. Why are you here? Didn't this kid say that he was going back? Why did he suddenly appear here? And he directly rushed to the center of the group of people who were besieging him. Did he think that he had lived too long? Chu Luiyue wanted to explain, but the surrounding people were staring at her covetously, so she didn't have the chance to speak. Chu Yu? Jean Lei's dark eyes swept across Chu Luiyue and sneered. Looks like you're also a student of Lingxiao College? He quickly ran through his mind. Among the first-rate families in the Divine Ruins world, there was no one with the surname Chu. This made him even more unscrupulous, and he didn't take Chu Luiyue seriously at all. Today he had even offended the Yuntian Tower and so on. Why would he be afraid of such a small thing? You're quite bold at such a young age. Chu Luiyue gripped the long yuan sword in her hand tightly, but her expression didn't seem to be nervous. Hearing this, she even laughed. Everyone praises me like that. Jean Lei's eyelids twitched violently, and his expression quickly turned cold. Looks like the elders of your college really don't know how to teach people. Didn't anyone tell you that there are some people you can't afford to offend? Chu Luiyue blinked, then looked at Rong Xiu and asked with incomparable sincerity. Senior brother Rong Xiu, are they all people I can't afford to offend? When she said, Senior brother Rong Xiu, her voice was clear and gentle, and she slightly dragged the last syllable. Listening to it, it was like a feather gently tickling one's heart, making one's heart itch. Looking at her clever and cunning eyes, as well as the witty smile on her lips, Rong Xiu raised his sword-like eyebrows slightly, and his eyes darkened slightly. Her character really hadn't changed. If it weren't for the fact that there were still so many people here, he calmly suppressed the desire in his heart, and his thin lips curved into a perfect arc. Of course not. His voice was deep and magnetic, and every word seemed to be whispering softly beside one's ear, making one unconsciously sink into it. You can provoke me however you want. The conversation between the two of them was ambiguous, but to the others, it sounded a little ungrateful and even arrogant. Jean Lei laughed as if he had heard a joke. Ha! He raised the axe in his hand and pointed it directly at the two of them. Everyone, there's not much time left. A piercingly dangerous murderous intent suddenly erupted from his body. When the elders in the distance saw this scene, their hearts pounded violently. Elder Wanzheng anxiously prepared to step forward, but Rong Xiu suddenly glanced over. There was a hint of a smile on his incomparably noble face. Elders, don't worry. With me around, I will definitely protect her. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 1193. Elder Wanzheng and the others were stunned. Jean Lei and the others had already made their move. Almost at the same time, the elders of the academy followed closely behind them. Quite a number of people were stopped. After all, there were many elders from the academy now. In terms of numbers, both sides were basically equal. However, there were still a few people who were faster. They surrounded Rong Xiu and Chu Luiyue. Rong Xiu suddenly took a step forward and patted Chu Luiyue's shoulder lightly. Just stay here. Leave the rest to me. Chu Luiyue felt her shoulders sink. Then, something slid down her shoulder quietly. She opened her hand and quickly put that thing into her universe ring. She looked up at Rong Xiu. The two of them looked at each other and understood each other's intentions. She nodded without batting an eyelid. Senior brother, be careful. Rong Xiu raised his hand and quickly set up a golden barrier around Chu Luiyue. Then he moved and stood in front of Chu Luiyue. I'm your opponent. He raised his chin slightly. His expression was calm, but there was a noble arrogance in his bones. "Come at me together." Rong Xiu's words completely infuriated the few of them. Arrogant. In recent years, Rong Xiu was indeed famous as the holy son of the Yuntian Tower. It was rumored that his birth mother secretly married someone from outside the world of God and gave birth to him. A few years after he was born, he was found by the people of the Yuntian Tower and found. At first, the Yuntian Tower planned to execute him directly. After all, this kind of thing was a great stain on the reputation of any first-rate family in the world of God. However, the Yuntian Tower kept him alive in the end. It was all because of his amazing talent. Later, not only did he survive in the Yuntian Tower, he even became the Holy Sun in one fell swoop. It was rumored that this person was cruel and ruthless. Otherwise, he wouldn't have gained so much power and control over the Yuntian Tower in just a few years while the Yuntian Tower's patriarch was in seclusion. Therefore, Jin Lei and the others did not underestimate Rong Xiu from the very beginning. But now, when they heard his words, they still felt that it was ridiculous. After the fight just now, they had a rough idea of Rong Xiu's strength. It was normal for him to be able to hold on for a while, but it was impossible for him to challenge so many of them at the same time. Jin Lei was the first to attack. The others were not willing to fall behind, afraid that the treasure would be snatched away by Jin Lei, so they followed closely behind. Rong Xiu hovered in the air and raised his arm. A ball of golden light quickly appeared in his palm. At the same time, his aura began to surge wildly. With him as the center, a shocking pressure frantically spread out in all directions. Jin Lei's heart skipped a beat, suddenly feeling a little uneasy. After the tough fight just now, Rong Xiu's strength should have weakened, but why did it seem like there was no change from before? At this moment, Rong Xiu looked up. Two clusters of golden flames flashed in the depths of his deep eyes. Jin Lei suddenly realized something, and a look of shock flashed across his face. "How did you refine a god?" Boom. He did not have time to finish his sentence. Rong Xiu waved his wrist lightly, and the ball of golden light quietly flew out. It was only the size of a fist, and it seemed to be wrapped in a layer of transparent glass. Inside, it was filled with a rich golden light. When it streaked across the air, it miraculously did not cause any energy waves. It looked very ordinary and it slowly floated forward. But a look of horror flashed across Jin Lei's eyes, and he quickly retreated. This Rong Xiu, he had actually concealed his true strength before. He retreated in a panic as if the small ball of golden light was something extremely terrifying. But he was fast, but the ball of golden light was faster. Moreover, he quickly realized that the space around him had become thick and heavy. Every move he made was extremely laborious. Why is his godly territory suppression so strong? The people next to him finally realized that something was wrong, and they all exclaimed in shock. Jin Lei's throat tightened, and the blood in his body almost froze. His mind was in a mess. Rong Xiu was the Yuntian Tower's holy son. According to the rumors, the bloodline power in his body had already awakened, and he had already cultivated the Holy Sun's golden body. The so-called Holy Sun's golden body was also a special divine body. It was a secret technique unique to the Yuntian Tower's Holy Sun. Other cultivators might not be able to cultivate their own divine body even if they became a high god. But the Yuntian Tower was different. Over the years, their Holy Sons had been able to activate their bloodline power and form a Holy Sun golden body at the same time. In other words, they had forged their own divine body. Because of this, the Yuntian Tower's Holy Sun's combat strength was usually extremely strong. But there were advantages and disadvantages to this. Once they cultivated the Holy Sun's golden body, they would not be able to cultivate a more powerful divine body. This was also a huge shackle for them. But just now, he clearly felt that Rong Xiu clearly displayed a divine body suppression that was stronger than the Holy Sun's golden body. He had two divine bodies. And the suppression of this godly territory was naturally double. No. It was stronger than double. As these crazy thoughts flashed through Jin Lei's mind, the golden ball of light had already flown 3 steps away from him. Rong Xiu's expression was indifferent, and his eyes were disdainful. His thin lips curled slightly and he spat out a word. The suppression was heavy and it was like a divine judgment. Break. Digression, February, what do you think about your man having 2 godly territories? Rong Xiu, calm smile waiting for praise, pushed someone's face away. That's not important. What's important is that from today onwards, the monthly votes will be doubled. What do you think? February, I've already set the date for October's explosive release. The more monthly votes you get, the more explosive it will be. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 1194. Following his command, the golden ball of light suddenly exploded. In an instant, golden light flashed. It was as bright as day between heaven and earth. The brilliant light instantly enveloped the surroundings. A powerful god territory descended. Before the few of them could fight Rongxiu, they were already trapped in this god territory. They instinctively wanted to use their own god territories to fight back, but they quickly realized in horror that in this god territory shrouded in golden light, their strength was severely suppressed, and they could not use their own god territories. In fact, even moving had become extremely difficult. This was truly a situation where they were meat on someone's chopping board. If they could not think of a way to break free as soon as possible, they could only stay here and be attacked by Rongxiu at will. Jin Lei actually had no intention of fighting with Rongxiu again. Dual divine domains. Anyone who went up against him would only end up dead. However, even though he tried his best to retreat, it was already too late. This was because the distance between them and Rongxiu was very close to begin with, and he had charged at the front just now. It was too late for him to retreat now. Compared to the few of them who were stuck in a dilemma, Rongxiu, who was in the middle, seemed to be exceptionally relaxed. His gaze darkened, and the space in front of him began to collapse inch by inch. It looked like it was about to reach where those few people were. Anyone with a discerning eye could see that if he wanted to, he could directly take their lives now. Not only were Jin Lei and the others shocked, but the people who were fighting in the distance also noticed the commotion and looked over. It was fine if they did not look, but once they did, everyone's faces were filled with disbelief. In fact, even Elder Shu Feng and the others did not know how powerful Rongxiu was now. Hence, when they saw this scene, the shock in their hearts was no less than Jin Lei and the others. Wasn't Rongxiu fighting with them just now? How did he suddenly become so strong now? An elder could not help but murmur softly. Elder Shu Feng suppressed the surging waves in his heart. Isn't that obvious? It's obvious that he was hiding his strength. Although they did not know why Rongxiu had suddenly changed his mind and used his true strength, it was still a good thing for them. This round was a sure win. I admit defeat. When the space collapsed in front of him, Jin Lei finally gave up without hesitation. His face was tense and the veins on his forehead were bulging. From this, it could be seen that although these words were spoken quickly, they were not done willingly. He wanted that treasure. After all, a king-grade origin tool was extremely rare in the Divine Ruins world. Even a first-rate family would crazily chase after it. But before that, he had to be alive. If he really died here today, then it would be like drawing water with a bamboo basket. In the end, it would all benefit others. Jin Lei had seen many big scenes. Although his temper was irritable and arrogant, he could still bend and stand tall at crucial moments. Rongxiu, as long as you stop now and let us go, I promise that the Golden Wing sect will never oppose the Yuntian Tower again. Jin Lei saw that the space in front of him was not slowing down, but the pressure on him was getting heavier. He could not help but swallow with difficulty and raise his voice again. I mean what I say. Rongxiu smiled. Really? Of course. I'm the sect master's direct disciple. In front of so many people, I will definitely do as I say. As Jin Lei spoke, he could already feel the pressure pressing down on him, causing his face to ache faintly. It was as if a sharp knife was constantly scraping his face. Rongxiu's eyebrows twitched slightly, and he seemed to be smiling. You should have said this earlier. Do you think you still have the right to bargain with me now? Jin Lei's face paled. He could see the killing intent in Rongxiu's eyes. Rongxiu really dared to kill him. Jin Lei was finally completely flustered. Rongxiu, I just want to snatch that treasure. I never had the intention to kill you. If you kill me here today, the Golden Wing sect will not let this matter rest. You want to use the Golden Wing sect to pressure me? Rongxiu's tone was languid, and his expression was indifferent. If the sect master of the Golden Wing sect was here, I could still give him face. Who are you? His voice was calm, but it carried the most powerful killing intent. Jin Lei choked. Only then did he remember that although he was highly regarded by the sect master, he was not the person in charge of the Golden Wing sect. On the other hand, Rongxiu, as the holy son of the Yuntian Tower, was on equal footing with their sect master. Rongxiu seemed to feel that these words were not enough of a blow to Jin Lei. Besides, even if I'm willing to let you go, the academy will still be in charge. The academy may not be so. Causing trouble in Fangzhou City was the same as causing trouble in Lingxiao College's territory. He originally wanted to end the battle quickly and snatch the treasure back. The sect master would definitely protect him for the sake of the treasure. But now, not only did he not get the treasure, he was also in a quagmire. His life and death were in the hands of the other party. You did it on purpose just now?" He suddenly realized something and blurted it out. Rongxiu had been besieged previously, but there were wins and losses, so the two sides were actually in a state of tug-of-war. They also thought that as long as they continued fighting, they would be able to snatch the treasure back from Rongxiu. But now that they thought about it, Rongxiu was just stalling for time. He gave them hope, thinking that the treasure was within their reach. In reality, he was just exhausting their strength and patience, waiting for the elders of Lingxiao College to arrive. Now he had turned the tables and gained the upper hand. Even if they wanted to leave, it would be difficult for them to escape the siege of so many elders. In an instant, Jin Lei's heart was filled with endless regret. It was all in the heat of the moment. If he had known, he would not have followed them. Rongxiu smiled slightly, admitting it. "You're easier to bait than expected. It must have been hard on the sect master of the Golden Wing sect to nurture you for so many years and entrust you with such an important task. In the end, he was just a brainless person." Jin Lei clenched his fists tightly, and countless thoughts flashed through his mind. His face gradually turned pale and soon he was covered in cold sweat. "It's all his fault for encouraging us." Suddenly, a sharp reprimand came from the side. "We wanted to compete fairly with you, but he urged us to join forces. He also urged us to chase after you." "That's right. It's him. It's all the Golden Wing sect's fault. It has nothing to do with us." Rongxiu. "Elders, every injustice has its perpetrator, and every debt has its debtor. This debt should be on Jin Lei's head." In an instant, the other families turned against him, and the situation was reversed. Jin Lei was trembling with anger, and then he laughed bitterly. Good. Since all of you have said so, then I don't have to be polite with you." As soon as he finished speaking, he suddenly shouted in a low voice. The next moment he actually forcibly broke free from Rongxiu's god realm. In an instant, his skin and flesh ruptured. Blood dripped everywhere. He went straight for Chu Luiwei on the other side. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 1195. Jin Lei's outburst was extremely sudden. No one expected him to suddenly turn around and charge towards Chu Luiwei while he was still begging for mercy. Moreover, he did it in such a decisive manner. Chu Luiwei realized what he was going to do the moment he charged towards her. She moved her feet and quickly dodged backwards. Probably because she was surrounded by Rongxiu's enchantment, although she was also in the divine realm, she was not affected at all and could still move freely. This also gave her a chance to shake off Jin Lei. However, Jin Lei was already a little crazy at this moment. He was on the verge of breaking down. When those people turned against him and pushed all the blame onto him, he knew that he was finished. The matter had already blown up. Lingxiao College needed an explanation. These clans and sects needed to shirk their responsibilities. Even the sect leader of the Golden Wing sect would not be willing to go against the school and Yuntian Tower for him, who had not taken back anything. He knew that he would become a sacrifice for the balance of everything. The situation was set. He had no other choice. Therefore, in his madness, the only way he could think of to protect himself was to kidnap a student from Lingxiao College. It did not matter who the student was or what her identity was. The important thing was that Lingxiao College would definitely not give up on their student in front of so many people. They would definitely give in. These thoughts flashed through Jin Lei's mind in an instant. Therefore, he did not hesitate to make a move. Even if he forcefully broke free from Rongxiu's divine realm and was heavily injured. But at this moment he was about to lose his life. Why would he care about that? Black Bone Leopard. He quickly closed in on Chu Luiwei as he shouted. He summoned his own contracted magical beast. To be more precise, it was a contracted magical beast. A vigorous black figure appeared in response to the call. It was a bun that was completely black. Only its eyes were dark green like ghost fire. It made one's heart turn cold just by looking at it. Its speed was even faster than Jin Lei. In the blink of an eye, it was already behind Chu Luiwei. One man and one beast prepared to launch a pincer attack on Chu Luiwei. Chu Luiwei's eyes turned cold. Dumpling. Whoosh. The sound of wings flapping could be heard. A crimson-tailed red phoenix that was crimson all over appeared in everyone's line of sight. It flapped its wings and the flames on its body raged. Everywhere it passed, everything was burned to ashes. Seeing Dumpling, the black bone leopard hesitated for a moment, and a trace of panic flashed across its eyes. In the Divine Ruins world there were quite a few types of divine beasts, but even if they were all divine beasts, there were still differences in strength. Among the divine beasts, there were two primordial divine beasts, the Great Void Phoenix Dragon and the Crimson Gold Heavenly Phoenix. Behind them were the divine beast clans that possessed the power of their bloodlines. Correspondingly, the stronger the bloodline power, the higher the status. Although the Black Bone Leopard was also a divine beast, compared to Dumpling who possessed the bloodline of the primordial divine beasts, it was still lacking. The reverence for the two primordial divine beasts' bloodlines that were buried deep in its bones and blood made the Black Bone Leopard fearful, and it even faintly wanted to submit. With just this moment of hesitation, Dumpling had already taken the lead to attack. Boom! A ball of red fire flew out. It went straight for the Black Bone Leopard. The Black Bone Leopard hurriedly dodged, but a part of its tail was still burned. Dumpling directly swooped down. Its sharp claws clawed at the Black Bone Leopard's eyes. The two divine beasts quickly engaged in a battle. Jean Lei's expression froze for a moment. He did not expect that such a young and tender youth would actually contract with such a level of divine beast. This Chuyu might not be so easy to deal with. But at this moment, Jean Lei already had no other choice. So he did not stop his footsteps and continued to rush towards Chu Luiyue. At the same time, he used all his strength to withstand the terrifying pressure of the Rongxiu and forcefully raised his axe. Fiercely chopped down. Crack. A small crack appeared on the golden barrier. Chu Luiyue's eyebrows twitched. She quickly retreated while circulating the force in her body. Bang. The barrier shattered. At this moment, the distance between the two of them was extremely close. Jean Lei raised the axe in his hand again and chopped down. The void shook. A tyrannical wave crazily attacked. The Rongxiu's expression turned fierce, and murderous intent surged in his eyes. However, at this moment, a burst of intense light suddenly erupted from Chu Luiyue's hand. A ball of light shot up into the sky. It's that Emperor Divine Weapon. Suddenly, a cry of surprise came from the crowd. Chu Luiyue's heart trembled. Emperor Divine Weapon? So this was what they wanted to snatch. Immediately after, Chu Luiyue saw that wherever the ball of light passed, a faint glow would scatter. The Rongxiu's golden divine territory actually quietly dissipated. After seeing this clearly, Chu Luiyue's heart tightened, and she suddenly felt that something was wrong. The aura of an Emperor Divine Weapon was actually stronger than the Rongxiu's divine territory? She looked up. The light on the ball of light was gradually becoming gentler. From here she could vaguely see that there was something inside. Moreover, as the light flashed on the ball of light, the outline inside became clearer and clearer. More importantly, the aura on the ball of light was also crazily increasing. Jean Lei's axe had just chopped down when the sharp aura was swept away by the invisible wave of the ball of light and disappeared without a sound. Chu Luiyue sucked in a cold breath. This thing, that's not an Emperor Divine Weapon. Elder Shu Feng suddenly exclaimed in shock. That's a venerable divine weapon. The moment he said that, everyone was shocked. Everyone, including the many elders of Lingxiao College, firmly believed that the treasure that appeared from Blue Feather's abyss was an Emperor Divine Weapon. According to the records of the college, the equipment refiner back then was indeed a king equipment refiner. No one would have thought that the last thing he left behind was a legendary venerable divine weapon. No wonder. No wonder he died not long after he finished refining it. It was obvious that he had exhausted all his energy and effort for this thing. In the dead silence, Jean Lei was the first to react. The situation of being on the verge of death had stimulated all his potential. He didn't even think about it before he charged upwards. Now, the closest to the venerable divine weapon was Chuyu, and the second was him. As long as he could surpass that ignorant brat and take the venerable divine weapon for himself, he would definitely be able to turn the situation around. When he thought of this, his eyes became even crazier. He chased after him with all his might. The moment Jean Lei moved, Chu Luiyue moved as well. Rongxiu did not pass the item to her for her to lose it. If it really fell into the hands of others, she would not be able to bear the blame. However, she quickly discovered a problem. Under the terrifying power of that treasure, she could not teleport. Because of this, her speed was slower than Jean Lei's. In the blink of an eye, Jean Lei had already caught up. The two of them were very close. Jean Lei directly threw the axe in his hand. It chopped toward Chu Luiyue. You want to snatch it from me? Dream on. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 1196. At this moment, Chu Luiyue and Jin Lei were the closest to the venerable divine weapon. Who would be able to obtain it had become the focus of everyone's attention. When they saw Jin Lei directly throw his axe at Chu Luiyue, the faces of the elders on the academy's side changed. Chu Yu? Elder Wanzheng's heart sunk. That kid was only at the middle stage of rank 7. How could he be Jin Lei's match? If he was hit by this attack, he was afraid that the hearts of Elder Wensi and the others were also hanging high in the air. At this moment, no one could make a move. Everything depended on Chu Yu. When Chu Luiyue saw Jin Lei, she knew that he was a god-level expert. He was a god-level expert who had stepped into the god-level realm. His level was much higher than hers. Even she knew that if she were to face such a person head-on, she would only have death waiting for her. However, they were so close to each other and no one could help her. She had to take this attack on her own. Looking at the ice-cold axe that was flying toward her rapidly, Chu Luiyue did not hesitate at all and used her strongest combat ability. In an instant, a layer of golden armor covered her body. At the same time, a black shield stood in front of her. Jin Lei didn't think much of it and couldn't help but laugh. My axe is a high-level divine weapon and it's extremely sharp. Do you think you can just take out a shabby shield and clang? The two collided. He didn't manage to finish his sentence. His smug expression quickly turned into astonishment and disbelief, because his axe was actually unable to split open the black shield. Instead, it was bounced back by the intense collision. Swoosh. He quickly dodged. The axe brushed past his face. He had actually cut off half of his ear. In an instant he felt excruciating pain. His face was covered in blood. Coupled with his already pale face, he looked even more battered and exhausted. That was not all. A strong gust of wind swept past him and at the same time, it slowed down his speed. The distance between him and Chu Luiyue widened again. You? Jin Lei looked at Chu Luiyue in shock and anger. He covered his ear with one hand and couldn't believe what had just happened. A young man who wasn't even 20 years old withstood his attack and even gained the upper hand. One had to know that in order to ensure that his attack would hit the target, he had used all of his strength. It was a great humiliation. What a joke. Then the young man's face appeared from behind the black shield. His delicate and clean face was pale, and blood seeped out from the corner of his mouth. He wasn't completely unaffected by the collision just now. However, in the end he was still in one piece. Jin Lei couldn't describe how he felt. He looked at the black shield in Chu Luiyue's hand. There was something wrong with that thing. Ever since he got the axe, he had been invincible. Invincible. No matter how tough something was, no matter how solid the barrier was, he could easily split it open with his axe. Isn't the barrier that Rong Xiu set up like this? However, such a sharp axe was completely useless in front of the black shield. Jin Lei took a closer look and realized that there wasn't even a mark on it. This was definitely not an ordinary yuan instrument. Chu Luiyue sensed the madness in his eyes and immediately became alert. All the muscles in her body tensed up. Her opponent's power was much higher than hers. She almost couldn't take that blow. If she were to do it 2 more times, her arm would probably be crippled first. She made a prompt decision and continued to charge towards the thing above her. Dumpling. She let out a clear shout. A red figure quickly approached her. It was Dumpling, who had just finished off the black bone leopard. There were still a few pieces of flesh on its claws. It had been left behind when it had scratched the black bone leopard's face. Chu Luiyue leaped and jumped onto Dumpling's back. Whoosh! Dumpling flapped its wings and its speed suddenly increased. Jin Lei instinctively turned back to take a look. His contracted divine beast, the black bone leopard, was now beyond recognition. Its face and body were badly mutilated, and there were several red flames burning on its body. It was rolling around in pain, trying to extinguish the flames. However, how could the flames of the red-tailed phoenix be extinguished so easily? As if sensing Jin Lei's gaze, the black bone leopard raised its head and looked over. All the coldness and ruthlessness in its eyes had disappeared. Instead, it was full of desire and hope. Now the only one who could help it was its master. However, Jin Lei forcibly retracted his gaze and chased after Chu Luiyue. At this time he was already a clay bodhisattva crossing the river. He couldn't even protect himself, so how could he care about anything else? The black bone leopard was already crippled and couldn't help him. He could only give it up. Seeing Jin Lei's action, the black bone leopard's only intact eye moved, leaving only mournful despair. It howled. However, Jin Lei turned a deaf ear to it. He mobilized all his strength, hoping to snatch that venerable origin device before Chu Luiyue. However, imagination was beautiful but reality was cruel. He soon realized that after the previous battle, he had used up more than half of his strength. He couldn't catch up to the red-tailed phoenix at all. The distance between the two sides was increasing. This made Jinlei more and more anxious. If he was unable to seize this final opportunity, then he would probably have to stay here forever. After thinking about it, he gritted his teeth and made a bold decision. Since it was a dead end anyway, he might as well take a risk. Even if he really died, he could drag someone down with him. At this thought, a strange pattern suddenly appeared between his brows. That was the Golden Wing Sect's totem. When the totem appeared, the origin power around his body began to boil. It began to rise at an abnormal speed. One of the elders suddenly exclaimed in surprise. "Oh no! He's burning his bloodline power." Of course, the disciples of the Golden Wing Sect also had bloodline power. However, their bloodline power was different from that of ordinary aristocratic families. Most of them obtained the corresponding bloodline power through cultivation or other methods. And this was also an important condition for them to settle down in the sect. The stronger the bloodline power, the higher their status, and the greater their right to speak in the sect. At this moment, he activated the totem and burned the bloodline power he had accumulated with great difficulty. It was obvious that he was planning to fight to the death. Chuyu was in danger. However, as soon as he said that, everyone saw that Rongxiu had already moved. He took a step forward with his long legs and quickly approached Jinlei. His face was expressionless, as if covered with a layer of frost, cold to the bone. There was no doubt that he had already made up his mind to kill Jinlei. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 1197. Sensing the cold, murderous intent behind him, Jinlei turned around instinctively. After glancing at Rongxiu, he couldn't help but shiver, and a deep sense of fear rose from the bottom of his heart. Why did Rongxiu suddenly have such a strong murderous intent towards me? They had been fighting for so long, but Rongxiu's emotions were calm and indifferent. It was as if everything had nothing to do with him. Or perhaps he did not care about those things at all. Even when Rongxiu attacked with all his might and suppressed all of them, he did not react at all. But now he had suddenly become like this. Jinlei really could not understand. The pressing time and the crisis of life and death made him unable to think carefully about this matter. The only thing he could do was to rush toward Chu Luiyue at an even faster speed. Either he could snatch that venerable 1 yuan instrument, or he could kidnap Chuyu. Chu Luiyue flew upward with Dumpling. At this moment, the venerable 1 instrument had stopped and was quietly suspended in midair. It was still enveloped in a layer of faint light. From where Chu Luiyue was, she could barely see the outline of the object inside. It seemed like it was also a sword. The closer she got, the clearer she could feel the pressure coming from above. Chu Luiyue held her breath. The aura of this sword was several times stronger than the Dragon Abyss sword. The Dragon Abyss sword was personally forged by Taizu. It triggered 81 Tianlei and was considered a high-level divine instrument. Even in the Divine Ruins world, the Dragon Abyss sword was definitely a valuable treasure. After Chu Luiyue came to the academy, she realized that although Taizu was unable to break through to the High God realm and remained at the Demigod realm, he was extremely outstanding in the aspect of weapon forging. However, every time she asked about this, Taizu did not seem to be willing to talk about it. After a few times, Chu Luiyue did not ask anymore. The sword in front of her was a venerable 1 instrument. It was 2 whole levels higher than the Dragon Abyss sword. The degree of its tyranny was self-evident. "Girl, this venerable artifact doesn't have an artifact soul. You can take it." Taizu's voice suddenly came from the bottom of his heart. Chu Luiyue was stunned. Artifact soul? That's something that only King Divine artifacts and above have. I'll explain it to you in detail in the future. All you need to do now is to snatch it. The Long Yuan sword was not bad, but compared to this it was far inferior. Chu Luiyue pursed his lips when he heard Taizu being so excited. "Taizu, please enlighten me. The Long Yuan sword has a sword spirit. Although it can't be compared to the sword spirit, with me around I can lend a helping hand. You just have to find the right time to transfer the sword soul to that sword. Such an opportunity could be said to be extremely rare." However, Chu Luiyue suddenly hesitated. "But, Taizu, this venerable 1 instrument belongs to the academy. It doesn't seem appropriate for me to take it for myself." According to what they had said, the academy had sent out many people and spent a lot of manpower and resources in order to retrieve this item. If she were to do that now, she would feel a little apologetic. Originally, this matter had nothing to do with her. She had only come here because she was worried about Rongxiu. During the crisis just now, Rong Xiu had handed this item to her without hesitation so that she could take good care of it. But if she took the opportunity in the end to take it for herself? Taizu was stunned for a moment, then his voice became much calmer. You're right. I was a little impulsive. Just now, when he sensed that this venerable one instrument didn't have an artifact soul, he was too excited and didn't think too much. But after listening to Chu Liyue's words, he thought carefully and felt that it made sense. Although this venerable one instrument is extremely rare, but just do as you think. Taizu comforted. It wasn't that he didn't have any regrets. Even he had only heard of the Honorable Master Divine Weapon in legends. Now that such a rare treasure was in front of her, Chu Liyue chose to give it up. With her intelligence she would know what this meant. You are the pride of the Shangguan family. Taizu sighed with emotion. With such a temperament, what would she have to worry about in the future? Chu Liyue also smiled. Thank you, Taizu, for your praise. Then I'll take it back first. At this moment, Dumpling had already flown to the side of the light ball. Chu Liyue jumped down. She didn't know how it came out just now, so Chu Liyue wanted to try to get it back into the Qianquan ring. However, at this moment, the golden lightning suddenly approached. In an instant, Chu Liyue's hair stood on end. Countless experiences wandering on the edge of life and death had already forged her instincts. She turned around without any hesitation. Jean Lei's fist, which was burning with the power of bloodline, was already in front of her. Chu Liyue raised her sword. The divine power in her dantian suddenly surged out. Boom! The Long Yuan sword suddenly exploded with a powerful aura. The golden lightning shocked Jean Lei. Divine power? Could this young man really be a god-level expert? He didn't have time to think too much and attacked with all his might. The reason why he dared to fight Chu Liyue with his bare hands was that his fist was already covered with a layer of scales. Although he had yet to completely forge his own divine body, he had already finished forming this hand. In other words, the power of this punch was comparable to a real divine body. Therefore Jean Lei was very confident. Clang! The Long Yuan sword and Jean Lei's fist collided. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 1198. After a short moment of dead silence, an intense pain came from his hand. The expression on Jean Lei's face instantly froze. The sound of a sharp sword piercing through flesh was heard, making one's teeth ache. Jean Lei could even feel the sharp tip of the sword rubbing against his bones. A trace of panic finally appeared in his eyes, and he quickly retreated. But how could it be so easy to come and go as one wished? Chu Liyue stared at him coldly, her eyes sharp and cold. At the same time, she held the sword tightly and pushed forward again. Helpless, Jean Lei could only change his fist into a palm and forcefully grab the sword blade. Without any hesitation, another large piece of flesh was scraped off. Fresh blood kept dripping from his hand, flowing down the black blade of the Long Yuan sword. The intense pain caused his face to turn pale. The next moment he clenched his teeth, grabbed the Long Yuan sword and threw it out fiercely. Although Jean Lei was already at the end of his rope, he was still a god-level expert. A starving camel was still bigger than a horse. Chu Liyue used her fastest speed to mobilize the godly power in her body and gave Jean Lei this blow. But in many aspects she was still inferior to him. For example, Jean Lei, who was in a state of madness, threw Chu Liyue out of balance in an instant. Her body was thrown to the side. A ray of golden light flew over quickly, and a gentle and strong force supported her, allowing Chu Liyue to quickly stabilize her body. But at this moment, a soft sound of collision suddenly fell into her ears. Chu Liyue instinctively turned her head to look. It turned out that after she was thrown out, the Long Yuan sword that she was holding had accidentally knocked into the ball of light beside her in the process of struggling. The tip of the sword had pierced into the ball of light by about an inch. That sound was produced when the tip of the Long Yuan sword came into contact with the sword inside. It was crisp, clean, and pleasing to the ear. Just by hearing it, one could tell that it was definitely a peerless sword. If it was any other time, Chu Liyue would be very happy to hear this sound and see this treasure. It was even better to have a chance to observe it closely. But at this moment, her heart suddenly jumped. The words that Taizu said just now suddenly appeared in her mind. That venerable divine weapon did not have a soul. Chu Liyue hurriedly tried to pull back the Long Yuan sword. But when she tried, she realized that the Long Yuan sword seemed to be sucked onto the sword. It was motionless. At the same time, she could clearly feel that something was gushing out from the Long Yuan sword and continuously entering the sword. As the Long Yuan sword's owner, Chu Liyue knew what it was. Sword soul. The accumulated energy within the Long Yuan sword began to frantically transfer. This time Chu Liyue was really shocked. She did not expect such a mistake. She increased her strength, wanting to take back the Long Yuan sword. But it was all in vain. The sword in the ball of light was extremely powerful. It was as if he was crazily plundering the Long Yuan sword. The others did not notice the situation on Chu Liyue's side. Jin Lei saw that Chu Liyue stood there motionless after barely managing to stand. He thought that she had been beaten silly and planned to follow up with another attack. However, as soon as he took a step forward, he suddenly felt a chill run down his spine. He stiffened his neck and looked down. An extremely thin golden line swayed gently in midair. There was a drop of blood on it. It was dark red. Great panic surged in his heart. He turned his gaze and saw that half of his calf had been silently cut off. He didn't even hear the sound of his bones breaking because all of this had happened too quickly. The next moment, that half of his calf suddenly fell under his gaze. He raised his head in horror and saw that Rong Xiu was already not far away from him. It was only because he had focused all his attention on the battle with Chu Liyue that he did not notice. Rong Xiu floated in the air, and his noble face looked as if it was covered in snow. His pair of deep eyes were like a 1,000-year-old lake, and one look was enough to freeze a person. That was a strong murderous intent. He had one hand behind his back and the other hand was wrapped around a golden line. It was the line that had cut off Jin Lei's calf. Jin Lei's face was pale and his cracked lips trembled. Rong Xiu's slender fingers moved slightly. The golden thread instantly transformed into countless sharp blades of light and flew toward the golden lightning. No! Jin Lei sensed danger and was about to beg for mercy when he felt a chill in his throat. A gush of warm blood suddenly spurted out. It was his throat that had been cut off. Jin Lei raised his hand in a panic and wanted to cover the wound on his throat. But halfway through he realized that his hand had fallen off. Then it was his forearm and upper arm. Piercing pain came from all over his body. He opened his mouth, but only the sound of the wind could be heard. He knew that his body was gradually disintegrating. He could even feel the blood in his body gushing out and it was quickly cooling down. Jin Lei widened his eyes and stared fixedly at Rong Xiu. However, his eyeballs exploded the next moment. Annihilation silent. Countless people were watching this hellish scene, their hearts and minds trembling. The so-called death by 1,000 cuts was nothing more than this. When they looked at Rong Xiu again, many people's state of mind changed. He used such a cruel method to kill him, but his expression was so calm and indifferent. This man was really too scary. But the next moment they saw an even more shocking scene. The young man standing next to the light ball suddenly fainted. The moment he fell, Rong Xiu went to his side and picked him up by the waist. Digression. Those who are fighting for the star of the monthly votes and star of the recommendation votes, please join the group as soon as possible to verify. Currently, the maximum number of monthly votes is 56 times 2. The star of the commentary vote is still pending. There are only 2 days left. Finally, the release time is October 13th at dawn. Raise the monthly votes. Countdown to release. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 1199. Chu Liyue seemed to have had a very long dream. In the dream she seemed to be constantly tugging and fighting with someone. She couldn't see the other person's face or figure clearly. She didn't even know if the person opposing her was a person or not. There was only an extremely tyrannical force that firmly entangled her and pulled her forward. She desperately retreated, wanting to escape, but her body was still uncontrollably dragged forward. Finally, she saw a huge black abyss appear in front of her. She glanced down and knew that she absolutely couldn't go to that place, even though she didn't see anything and didn't know what was hidden inside. But her sharp intuition told her that it was dangerous. Her feet were firmly planted on the ground, and she opened her mouth to shout. But everything was useless. She was like a fish struggling in the desert. Waiting for her was only endless darkness and death. Finally, she was still dragged to the edge of the black abyss. One of her feet had already slipped and stepped on air. No. The room was silent. This murmur was especially clear. Rong Xiu had been sitting by the bed and holding her hand. Seeing that she seemed to be showing signs of waking up, he was slightly relieved. But when he saw her painful and struggling expression, his heart ached again. Her brows were tightly knitted as if she was enduring great pain, and her mouth was still muttering something. Rong Xiu held her hand tightly, then leaned closer and kissed her forehead. Soon after, he half-hugged her in his arms and let her head rest on his chest. His other hand gently patted her hand, gently and patiently coaxing her. I'm here. Hearing this low voice, Chu Liwei seemed to finally calm down, and her brows gradually relaxed. After a while, she slowly opened her eyes. What entered her eyes was a blur. She closed her eyes and gradually adapted to the surrounding light, then she could see everything in front of her clearly. This was an unfamiliar room. The room was clean and tidy. Although there weren't many things, those that were placed were extremely precious. There was a low-key nobility everywhere. Chu Liwei immediately reacted. This wasn't her residence. No. Wasn't she outside just now? He's awake. Rong Xiu's voice came from above. Chu Liwei raised his head and looked at him in a daze. Their eyes met. Her eyes were extremely beautiful. In the past, they were always bright and resplendent, flickering with a clever and crafty light. At this moment, it was unknown whether it was because she had experienced too many things, or because she had just woken up and had yet to regain her senses, but her eyes seemed to be covered with a layer of mist. It was so hazy that she couldn't see clearly, and there was a hint of confusion in her eyes. Rongxiu, senior martial brother? Chu Liwei looked at him and called out subconsciously. He didn't even forget to add the last two words. Rongxiu's eyes instantly darkened. They were so deep that one couldn't see the bottom. He bent down and kissed her lips. Their breaths touched each other and their warm breaths spilled out. Even the air seemed to have become ambiguous. Chu Liwei was caught off guard, and before she could react, her territory was already taken over by someone else. She was about to struggle, but Rongxiu had already grabbed her hand tightly and deepened the kiss. But when Chu Liwei was a little out of breath and wanted to push him away, he restrained himself and let go of her. The man's deep eyes swept across her exceptionally moist lips. He raised his eyebrows and reached out to wipe her lips. His slightly rough fingertips brushed against her soft lips. Was a little rough. His eyes were very dangerous, as if he was suppressing something, but his actions were exceptionally gentle. After a while, he stopped and pinched her chin, raising her face slightly. After looking around carefully, he nodded his head in satisfaction. You shouldn't be able to tell now. Although he wanted to continue, he restrained himself when he thought of the group of people waiting outside. Chu Liwei's eyebrows twitched. At this moment, she had already recalled everything that had happened before she fainted. She remembered that she had been fighting with that man, but he had flung her away. Then, the Long Yuan sword had collided with the venerable artifact, and the sword spirit had also moved inside. And because she could not withstand the pressure produced during the process, she had fainted. After that divine artifact? She widened her eyes slightly and grabbed Rongxiu's arm. That sword? Don't worry, that thing is fine. Rongxiu knew what she was going to ask, so he immediately gave her an answer. His tone was calm with a hint of his usual laziness, as if he was talking about an extremely ordinary matter. No matter when, he seemed to be so calm and collected. Chu Liwei's mood was also affected by this, and she calmed down a lot. She heaved a sigh of relief. That's good. She thought the owner of that thing had once left a notebook in the academy. I'll help you look for it later. Rongxiu's sudden words stunned Chu Liwei for a moment. What? Owner? Notebook? What did she want that for? Seeing her reaction, Rongxiu raised his sword-like eyebrows and narrowed his eyes. Chu Liwei's heart suddenly thumped violently. Wait, could it be, you still don't know? Rongxiu spoke softly with a faint smile. That venerable artifact has already recognized you as its owner. Chu Liwei slowly widened her eyes. For some reason it lacked a weapon spirit, and the sword spirit of your Long Yuan sword had entered it, causing it to become your origin item. Rongxiu explained slowly. Logically speaking, the sword spirit of your sword would not be able to suppress that venerable artifact, and the only possibility was that it would be devoured and destroyed. However, for some reason the sword spirit took the initiative, and in the end this was also one of the reasons why you fainted. At that moment, the two forces collided and you could not withstand it, so you fainted. Chu Liwei heard every word Rongxiu said clearly, and she understood it very well. However, when strung together she was a little confused. To be more precise, she was completely stunned by the development of this matter. She really didn't want to take that thing for herself. She had even told Taizu about this matter back then, and she had clearly planned to leave it for the academy. How did it become hers in the end? Rongxiu gently touched her face. Don't worry, everyone saw the situation clearly at that time. You did not deliberately take it for yourself, but accidentally bumped into it when you were attacked. Also, no one knew that the venerable artifact did not have a weapon spirit. Everything was just a coincidence and the elders will not blame you. Hearing this, Chu Luiyue finally found her voice. She struggled to ask. Then, where are we now and where are the elders? Rong Xiu said. Oh, we are now in my residence and Elder Shu Feng and the others are still waiting in the hall outside. Chu Luiyue's gaze suddenly became strange. So how did I carried you back. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 1200. These few simple words contained too much confidence. Chu Luiyue couldn't accept it for a moment and fell silent for a moment. She had seized the venerable artifact that the academy had painstakingly snatched back. Rong Xiu carried the unconscious her back. Just like that, the two of them stayed in his room, allowing the elders to wait outside. Chu Luiyue rubbed her temples. She felt that there was no need for her to go out anymore. Given the current situation, once she stepped out of that door, she would probably die without a corpse. Knock knock. There was a knock on the door. A young man's cautious voice came from outside. Senior brother Rong Xiu, is junior brother Chu Yu awake? Elder Wan Zheng and the others are very worried. They all said that if he hasn't woken up yet, they would like to come in and take a look. Chu Luiyue, Rong Xiu couldn't help but laugh when he saw her pitiful expression. After a moment, he raised his voice slightly and said, Go and tell the elders that she's awake. After a short rest I'll bring her over. Yes. That person's attitude towards Rong Xiu was also very respectful. After responding softly, he quickly left. Chu Luiyue closed her eyes in despair. Won't I be beaten to death if I go out? Rong Xiu raised his eyebrows slightly and said indifferently, Who dares? Although he had a smile on his face, his tone was slightly raised, with a faint pressure, domineering and domineering. However, this expression only flashed past for a moment. He got off the bed first and then carried the person on the bed out of the blanket. Do you want to put on your own clothes, or do you want me to help you? In fact, in order to make it easier for Chu Luiyue to rest, he only took off her outer clothes and her inner clothes were still intact. However, when these words came out of his mouth, there was an inexplicable ambiguity. Chu Luiyue glared at him. You're still in the mood to joke at a time like this? We still don't know how to deal with those elders when we go out later. Rong Xiu kissed her face before reluctantly putting her down. He smiled lightly and said, Don't worry. It seems like you're really worried about what the elders will do to you. How rare. Chu Luiyue had just put on her outer robe and was tidying her hair. She turned to look at him when she heard him. What? Nothing. Rong Xiu's expression was as usual, and his thin lips held a slight smile. Actually, you don't have to worry too much. On one hand, the matter with the venerable artifact was an accident, you didn't do it on purpose. On the other hand, you saved me, so it's only right that I stay and take care of you. With Rong Xiu around, Chu Luiyue felt more at ease. She was actually just thinking about how to deal with the elder's interrogation. After all, there were simply too many things that she had to explain to him. She took a deep breath. Let's go. The hall was silent. Several elders sat in a row. Wei Shiping and the others had already been sent back. Those who were still here were all important figures in Lingxiao College. Even Elder Bo Yen, who was not involved in the matter outside, was here. No one spoke. Everyone's expressions were different, but they were all rather complicated. From time to time, some people would look at Elder Wan Zheng who was sitting in front. Elder Wan Zheng could only pretend that he did not see them. In fact, he was not in the mood to care about what these people thought. His mind was filled with the scenes from before. He thought that he had taken in a genius disciple and was very proud of it. But it was only now that he realized that this disciple of his was too good at hiding. Also, he was too good at causing trouble. Now, even he did not know how to exonerate that brat. At this moment, footsteps came from outside the door. Everyone in the hall immediately raised their heads in unison to look at him. Two figures could be seen walking over, one in front and one behind. The one walking in front was Rong Xiu, who had changed his clothes. And one step behind him was Chu Luiyue, whom everyone was waiting for. The two of them walked into the hall. Countless pairs of eyes fell on them. To be precise, they were all looking at Chu Luiyue. In fact, when Rong Xiu appeared in the school, he would be the center of attention. Situations like this, where he appeared with others but was ignored by everyone, were extremely rare. Even if Chu Luiyue lowered her eyes slightly, she could still feel those solid gazes on her, making her feel uneasy. Rong Xiu greets the elders. Sorry to keep you waiting. Rong Xiu bowed politely and calmly. Chu Luiyue followed. Student Chu Yu greets the elders. For a moment no one spoke. Chu Luiyue felt that the situation was getting worse. Fortunately, Elder Bo Yen was the first to speak. Rong Xiu, take a seat first. Rong Xiu shook his head and smiled. With the elders here, Rong Xiu does not dare to sit together. Rong Xiu declined, and Elder Bo Yen did not continue to persuade him. Anyway, his personality had always been like this. He would do whatever he wanted and would not do. He would only listen to his own thoughts. No matter what others said, it was useless. Therefore, Elder Bo Yen turned his gaze to Chu Luiyue. This was the first time he looked at this new student at such a close distance. Although he had a deep impression of this student before, he did not take a closer look. But today he had to take a good look. In fact, he was not unfamiliar with the name, Chu Yu. From successfully passing the examination at the beginning of the month and becoming Wan Zheng's disciple, to being imprisoned in Min Mountain after entering the school for a day. Any one of them would leave a deep impression on people. Moreover, such a big incident happened today. Chu Yu. Elder Bo Yen stroked his beard, but his expression was still calm. Are you feeling better? Chu Luiyue quickly replied. I am much better. Thank you for your concern, Elder Bo Yen. Humph. Suddenly a cold sneer came from the side. Do you really think I am concerned about you? If not for the fact that you took the venerable divine weapon, Guan He. Elder Bo Yen raised his voice slightly and looked at him with a warning look. Elder Guan He was so angry that he snorted and turned his head away. Am I wrong? The people of the school planned for months and gathered forces from all sides. It was not easy for us to wait for that item to appear and bring it back. But before he could even enter the academy, it had already become his. No matter what, we have to make him give us an explanation. His words did not hide the blame for Chu Luiyue. Elder Bo Yen frowned and was about to say something when Rong Xiu spoke first. Elder Guan He, you are wrong. It was not easy to get that venerable divine weapon, and it is also not bad that it became junior brother Chuning's. But you can't blame her for this. Elder Guan He's expression changed. Rong Xiu, are you trying to absolve her? In order to bring that item back safely, you suffered a lot, but in the end, after all, the item had always been with Rong Xiu and he was the one who was attacked. He was one of the few people who had the most right to speak. Rong Xiu smiled. I am not trying to absolve her. What I said is the truth. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 1201. At that time there were a few elders present. I believe everyone saw clearly that Chu Yu only wanted to snatch the item back and prevent it from falling into Jin Lei's hands. He didn't mean to take it for himself. If Jin Lei didn't counterattack and Chu Yu accidentally bumped into it, the incident wouldn't have happened. Rong Xiu's tone was calm and relatively objective. After that, he received the approval of a few elders. That's right. The situation at that time was indeed like that. I can also prove that the child didn't do it on purpose. Elder Guan He frowned and retorted. You can't just look at the surface. After all, that's a venerable artifact. For this item, those people from the Golden Wing sect didn't hesitate to follow it all the way to Fangzhou City. Who knows if someone would take advantage of the situation to get it? Elder Wanzheng finally couldn't hold back and asked. Guan He, what do you mean? Everyone knows what I mean. Chu Yu, you know best why things turned out this way, right? Elder Guan He didn't believe Rong Xiu's explanation at all. Although this news was kept under wraps at first, many people in the academy knew about it after it spread to Fangzhou City. Elder Bo Yen can testify to this, right? Elder Bo Yen paused. At that time, some people might have heard the news by accident. However, this can't be used as evidence to accuse this child. If it wasn't for the benefits, why would he take such a risk? In my opinion, he had planned this long ago. Otherwise, why would he appear next to Rong Xiu directly? How could it be so coincidental that the venerable artifact didn't have a soul, and his sword soul took the opportunity to occupy it? Everyone fell silent again. Even Elder Wanzheng's lips moved, but he couldn't say anything. Putting the first part aside, the latter part was indeed too coincidental. It was inevitable that this would make people suspicious. Rong Xiu suddenly said, Elder Guan He, do you know Jin Lei's realm? Elder Guan He was stunned. He didn't go outside at that time, nor did he fight with those people. However, he more or less heard some of it, so he understood. Supreme God. Rong Xiu nodded. Not bad. His true realm was indeed this. Moreover, he has already cultivated half a divine body. No one was shocked by this. It was normal for cultivators who had broken through to become high gods to want to condense their divine body as soon as possible. In that case, do you know what level Junior Chu Yu is at now? Guan He was stunned for a moment before he said impatiently, "He's just a new student, not my disciple. How would I know?" Rong Xiu looked at Elder Wanzheng. "Elder Wanzheng, you are her master. You should know her the best, right?" Elder Wanzheng hesitated. "Middle stage 7th step. Impossible." Elder Guan He immediately retorted. He clearly displayed his divine power at that time. How could he only be at the middle stage of the 7th step? This was something that he had heard from a few elders. It was definitely not fake. Chuyu is indeed at this level. The one who spoke was not Wanzheng but Elder Wenxi. He had a rare look of seriousness on his face as he said word by word, "I personally conducted the entrance test for him some time ago. At that time he was only at the early stage of the 7th step. He should have just broken through to the middle stage of the 7th step. I can guarantee with my reputation that what I said is true." Elder Guan He was speechless for a moment. Since Elder Wenxi said so, it was basically true. Then what's with the divine power? Everyone looked at Chu Luiwei in unison. Finally he had a chance to speak. Chu Luiwei sighed in his heart and explained that divine power was obtained by this student from a certain senior in the past. Of course he could not say that he snatched it. The hall fell silent again for a moment. The elders looked at each other. This reason seemed to make sense. After all, Elder Wenxi and Elder Wanzheng did not have to lie about this kind of thing for a student. That venerable divine artifact did not have a soul, which was unexpected. Elder Shu Feng suddenly said, "Even we who witnessed its birth with our own eyes and tried our best to bring it back, did not notice anything amiss during the process. If even we don't know then, Chuyu who has been staying in the academy should not know. I don't think it's possible that he deliberately planned it. Moreover, I've seen his sword, it's a high-level divine artifact. Logically speaking, the sword's soul stored in it could not successfully occupy a venerable divine artifact. But all of this still happened. In my opinion, maybe this child is fated with that thing." Elder Shu Feng was very open-minded. "Actually, we've put in a lot of effort this time just to invite it back to the academy, and not to let it wander outside. Although it belongs to Chuyu now, he is a student of the academy, so it can be considered as returning to the academy. From a certain point of view, this is also an inheritance of that senior, which is not a bad thing. What do you think?" His words were reasonable and well-founded, causing many people to nod their heads in agreement. Anyway, that thing had already recognized its master. Unless Chuyu's soul was destroyed, that thing would return to its ownerless state. But they could not kill Chuyu, right? After all, he was a student of the academy. Moreover, his talent and other aspects were outstanding. More importantly, he wasn't completely wrong this time. At the very least, he helped Rongxiu. Just this point alone was already very rare. Elder Guan He's expression changed, and in the end he only snorted coldly but did not say anything else. Elder Bo Yen looked over with a much gentler expression. "Chuyu, you don't have to worry. Since this matter has already happened, then everyone should accept it calmly. However, from now on, you must work hard in your cultivation, and not ruin the reputation of the academy and that senior." "Does this mean he doesn't intend to pursue the matter anymore?" Chu Liwei was overjoyed and hurriedly said, "Thank you for your advice, Elder. This student will definitely keep it in mind." She originally thought that this matter would be difficult to handle, but perhaps because of the support of Rong Xiu, Elder Wanzheng and the others, it was resolved relatively smoothly. As for the matter of Rong Xiu carrying her back and spending time with her for a long time, the elders did not ask much. Chu Liwei thought for a moment. Perhaps it was because this matter was not worth mentioning compared to the venerable artifact, so not many people cared. However, just as she was about to heave a sigh of relief, a voice came from the side, causing Chu Liu's heart to jump. "Chuyu." The one who spoke was Elder Hua Feng. Ever since Chu Liwei came in, he had been looking at her silently, and only now did he speak in a deep voice. He sat up straight and looked into Chu Liu's eyes, as if he wanted to see through all her thoughts. He asked word by word, "How did you pass through the Academy's barrier without anyone noticing?" Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from the Love Network. Chapter 1202. As soon as he said this, the entire hall fell silent. In fact, many people did not realize this problem before because their attention was focused on the Venerable One artifact. At this moment, when they heard Elder Huafeng's question, they suddenly came back to their senses. That's right. This was indeed an extremely important question. The Academy's barrier had always been heavily guarded, especially today. After knowing that the people from the Golden Wing sect had chased after Fang Zhou, The academy sent several elders to reinforce them and strengthen the barrier's security. No one was allowed to enter or exit the barrier at will. But Chuyu had inexplicably come out. For a moment, everyone in the hall looked at Chu Luiyue. Their gazes were different, but they were all filled with suspicion and scrutiny. The atmosphere was stagnant, as if even the surrounding air had frozen inch by inch. Elder Huafeng stared at her. The elders guarding the barrier said that they didn't notice any abnormal fluctuations at that time. One had to know that all the students in the academy had to report to the academy when they entered or exited the barrier. If they didn't report, the black jade token on their bodies would also send out a warning when they tried to pass through the barrier and leave evidence. But Chuyu didn't. It was as if he had suddenly appeared outside the barrier, and he had directly penetrated the layers of obstacles and rushed to Rongxiu's side. If he was a high god expert, all of this could be explained. But he was only at the middle of the 7th stage. The academy's barrier has always been opened without causing any commotion by the elders who are in charge of guarding it. And you? How did you do it? A new student who had just entered the academy for less than a month had such a method. How could it not be suspicious? Chu Liyue's body tensed up, and her eyes drooped slightly. She looked at the ground in front of her, but her mind was spinning crazily. At first, when she was about to go out, she was only worried about Rongxiu, so she didn't think too much about it. After waking up, she knew that this matter would definitely be dragged out by the elders for careful interrogation. Part of the worry in her heart came from this. How could she explain this? Could it be that she had learned it from her incomplete memories? That would be even more difficult to explain. She used to be a student of Lingxiao College, or else she wouldn't have those scenes in her mind. However, she herself could not remember what had happened at that time, so how could she explain it clearly to these people? Moreover, there weren't many students who knew how to open the barrier. Her identity was even more suspicious. There was a deathly silence in the hall. It was so quiet that even the sound of a pin dropping could be heard. Even the breathing had become tense. Even Elder Wanzheng furrowed his brows tightly. Chuyu, what exactly is going on? Just tell me what you know. After all, she was his student. It would be a lie if he said that he didn't feel heartache for her and that he wasn't biased. Even now, this student seemed very suspicious, but he still wanted to believe in him. As long as you say it, Master will believe you. Chu Liyue was stunned and looked up. Elder Wanzheng sat on the chair with one hand on the armrest and the other in front of him, clenched into a fist. It could be seen how nervous and worried he was. However, even though there was some helplessness in his eyes when he looked at her, there was more gentleness and tolerance. Chu Liyue felt warmth in his heart. Wanzheng, it's not important whether you believe him or not. Elder Guanhe, who was silent for a while, opened his mouth again. I already said that there's something wrong with this kid. You don't believe me? If he is really an ordinary middle-stage 7th-level martial artist and an ordinary student, how could he do such things? Wanzheng, even if he is your disciple, you have to keep your eyes open. Elder Wanzheng clenched his fist even tighter, but he only looked at Chu Liyue. Chu Liyue understood that everyone was waiting for her explanation. She took a deep breath and opened her mouth. I taught him. Before she could say anything, Rongxiu, who was beside her, spoke first. Chu Liyue looked up in shock, only to see him standing with his hands behind his back. His expression was calm and at ease, and there was even a faint smile on his lips. Rongxiu's words instantly caused a commotion in the hall. All the elders looked at each other, obviously shocked by his words. Elder Bo Yan's calm face finally showed a trace of shock and disbelief. Rongxiu, what did you say? You said you taught him? Facing everyone's questioning gazes, Rongxiu nodded calmly. That's right. Hua. Rongxiu's reply was just 2 words, but it was like a bowl of cold water being poured into a pot of oil. It instantly caused a huge uproar. Rongxiu, what do you mean by that? Elder Guanhe finally couldn't help but stand up and stare at the two of them. Rongxiu didn't seem to realize how big of an impact his words had on everyone present. He smiled and said, I can open the school's enchantment. This point all the elders should know, right? I taught her so she can naturally open it. What's so strange about that? What's so strange about that? Of course, everything was strange. Rongxiu was definitely one of the best in the school. He was indeed able to open the enchantment a few years ago, but this wasn't the crux of the problem. Guanhe, sit down first. Don't be so agitated. Elder Bo Yan raised his hand. Elder Guanhe could only sit down angrily and look deeply at the two of them. He wanted to see what the two of them could say. Rongxiu. Elder Bo Yan was the person with the highest status here. It was indeed the most appropriate for him to ask. You being able to open the enchantment is your business. But the crux of the matter is, why did you teach Chuyu? What's your relationship? And when did you teach him? He paused. This time you've only returned to the school for about a month. Not long after you came, you left with Elder Shu Feng and the others. Logically speaking, you and Chuyu shouldn't have any interactions, right? Other than the day at the beginning of the month when the two of them met, they didn't have any other opportunities to interact. Unless the two of them knew each other. Chuyu, we are indeed old acquaintances. Rongxiu didn't deny it and gave a vague answer. Everyone was silent for a moment. Elder Bo Yen frowned. Why didn't you? Halfway through his sentence he suddenly stopped. Right. That day at the Eastern Emperor Bell Tower, Rongxiu did look at Chuyu a few more times. At that time he didn't take it to heart. After all, Chuyu was accepted as a disciple by Elder Wanzheng and was the focus of everyone's attention. There didn't seem to be anything wrong with Rongxiu looking at him a few more times. But now that he thought about it, it turned out that they already knew each other? Before she came to the school, I taught her this. I thought she would need a long time to learn it, but I didn't expect her to understand it so quickly. As he spoke, Rongxiu turned around and gave Chu Luiyue a praising smile. Well done. As expected of the girl he fell in love with. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from the Love Network. Chapter 1203. Chu Luiyue. If there weren't so many elders staring at her with their death stares, she would be much happier to hear this praise. She really didn't expect that Rongxiu would actually take responsibility for this matter. Chu Luiyue pursed her lips as many thoughts flashed through her mind. Rongxiu probably knew what was going on. He purposely said that to cover for her so that she could keep her secret. But did he already know that she was actually able to open the barrier? But why didn't he say anything before? In fact, Rongxiu's attitude had always been like this when it came to matters of the academy. If she couldn't remember it herself, he wouldn't say anything. Thinking back to the conversation between the two of them on the night of the official admission, Chu Luiyue's heart moved slightly. She never doubted Rongxiu's feelings for her, and she also knew that Rongxiu must have his reasons for doing this. Even though she still didn't know what the reason behind it was. At this moment, Chu Luiyue didn't know that the moment she exchanged glances with Rongxiu in the eyes of everyone, was a strong evidence that the two of them already knew each other. When had Rongxiu ever spoken to someone so gently? His personality was cold and aloof, and after stabilizing his position as the Holy Sun for the past few years, his aura had grown stronger day by day. Now that he had returned, even many of the Academy's elders had to lower their heads and give him some face. It was only when he was talking to Chuyu that his expression was calm and gentle, which was hard to see. Thinking back to when Chuyu fainted, he immediately went forward and carried him back to his residence, and personally took care of him. Everyone's expression changed slightly. They didn't feel it before, but now that they thought about it, there were signs everywhere. Rongxiu was someone who wouldn't even tolerate someone else's blood splashing on him, but he didn't hesitate to carry Chuyu back. It would be strange if the two of them didn't know each other. Elder Bo Yen thought back to what happened before, and he already believed most of it. I see. But why haven't I heard you mention it before? She's always had a yearning for the academy and wanted to give it a try. If I reveal that we know each other in advance, I'm afraid it will be a lot more inconvenient. Rongxiu explained. These words were tactful but also arrogant. Lingxiao College was highly respected and had many strong students. Here, no matter what your background was, you would be weakened. What was more important was your own talent and strength. However, this did not mean that one's background was completely unaffected. If everyone knew that Chuyu and Rongxiu knew each other and seemed to be quite close, then the attitude of the elders and students would be greatly different. With Rongxiu's position in the academy, Chuyu would definitely receive a lot of benefits. And this was what Rongxiu meant by inconvenience. Everyone was speechless for a moment. They couldn't refute what Rongxiu had said. So you're saying that you deliberately hid this relationship just to let Chuyu cultivate in the academy? Although Elder Bo Yen said it as a question, he had already agreed with this statement. Rongxiu nodded indifferently, paused for a moment and then smiled. Her temper has always been like this, so we can only let her be. Although it sounded like a reprimand, who couldn't hear the indulgence and protectiveness in his words? Everyone could see that Rongxiu was going to protect Chuyu to the end. Everyone was silent for a moment, and then they exchanged glances. Who would have thought that this was the truth? With their relationship, it wasn't hard to explain why Chuyu would suddenly appear beside Rongxiu. That teleportation yuan instrument was probably given to him by Rongxiu. Chuyu, you took the risk to come out because you were worried about Rongxiu? Elder Wanzheng interrupted and asked. It was a big taboo in the academy to barge out of the barrier, and this was the only reason that could absolve this kid. Chu Luiyue blinked and nodded. That's right. Rongxiu, who was standing at the side, lowered his eyes slightly, hiding the smile that flashed across his eyes. Elder Wanzheng heaved a sigh of relief and laughed. Look, this kid didn't do it on purpose. Isn't it all because he was worried about Rongxiu? This kid is sincere, how can you blame him for everything, don't you think so? Elder Guan, he snorted coldly, looking as if he couldn't bear to continue watching, but he didn't refute. He had also heard about how Chuyu helped Rongxiu block the critical blow, and no one could deny Chuyu's sacrifice in this matter. Elder Bo Yin came back to his senses, shook his head and said disapprovingly. Rongxiu, even if you and Chuyu are familiar with each other, you can't just casually teach him the method to open the academy's barrier. This could be considered as one of the academy's top secrets, and other than the elders in charge of guarding the barrier, almost no one else knew about it. The reason why Rongxiu knew it was because back then, thinking about this, Elder Bo Yin quickly stopped his thoughts. Rongxiu showed an apologetic expression. This is my fault for not thinking about it, and I'm willing to be punished. Punishment? How should he punish him? Rongxiu and Chuyu were both in the wrong, but the two of them also contributed greatly to protect the venerable artifact. It was really hard to judge. Rongxiu, did you teach him anything else? Elder Bo Yin narrowed his eyes and asked. Rongxiu shook his head. Nope. Elder Bo Yin sighed inwardly. She had even taught him about the barrier, so what did it matter if she taught him anything else? Sigh. Why were these kids so worrisome? That's good. In the future you should pay more attention to such things. After all, I asked you to come back and help, and for that thing to come back, it was indeed hard on you. Make up for your mistakes, this time we'll let it go. Elder Bo Yin did not intend to punish Rongxiu because of this, but he thought that the barrier really did need to be strengthened. Rongxiu responded. Thank you, Elder. As for Chuyu, Elder Bo Yin pondered for a moment and looked to the side. Wanzheng, he's your disciple, what do you think? Elder Wanzheng leaned on the chair, frowning as he fell into deep thought. His expression looked very conflicted. Actually, everyone could understand. Chuyu was his disciple after much difficulty, and naturally his heart would ache. If the punishment was too heavy, how could he not feel heartache? But Chuyu was too bold this time, and violated a few of the academy's taboos. If he was not punished and warned, he might do it again in the future. Even more, other students would compete to imitate him. Then the entire academy would be in a mess. Knowing that it was difficult for him to make this decision, everyone waited patiently. After a while, Elder Wanzheng finally sighed and looked at Chu Luiyue. Chuyu. Chu Luiyue's heart tightened. Student is here. Elder Wanzheng paused before asking with difficulty. Is your talent as a Xian master higher than a celestial physician? Digression. Everyone is too awesome. Last day, begging for monthly votes, the countdown to October has officially begun. If you want to vote, please verify as soon as possible. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 1204. The expressions of everyone in the room changed after his words sounded. They used an extremely strange expression to look at Elder Wanzheng. What kind of **T question is this? We're asking you to consider how to punish him now. Who asked you to ask this? Cough. Elder Bo Yin coughed hard and gave him a look. Be careful. What are you doing? Elder Wanzheng understood. But he didn't want to bother. His mind was filled with Rongxiu's words just now. He taught him and then he learned it. To draw a Xian formation to open the academy's barrier, one had to be at least a level 9 Xian master. Didn't this prove that Chuyu was already a level 9 Xian master? He hadn't broken through to a level 9 celestial physician yet. How did he suddenly become a level 9 Xian master? What was this? Elder Wanzheng had the illusion that he had nurtured his student so diligently, but in the end, he had raised him astray. For a moment, he even suspected that he had raised a disciple for the Xian masters. Kid, tell me quickly. Chu Luiyue, why was master always able to find a blind spot? Elder Bo Yin finally couldn't help but speak. But, Wanzheng, we're talking about how to deal with his problem now. You can ask about this later, don't? We've already asked. Let's listen to what the child has to say first. A voice filled with excitement was heard. But it wasn't Elder Wanzheng who said this. Instead, Huafeng. Why are you joining in the fun? Elder Wanzheng saw Elder Huafeng's shining eyes. How could he not guess what he was thinking? This is my disciple. Don't interfere. Elder Huafeng chuckled. He's your disciple now, but the academy doesn't stipulate that a student can only have one master, right? Besides, weren't you the one who asked this question first? Can't we listen together? Tsk. Why didn't he think of this just now? He was so focused on wondering how that kid opened the barrier that he actually forgot about this. He only came back to his senses when Wanjing asked that question. That's right. For this kid to be able to do this, didn't it prove that his talent as a Shen master was extraordinary? Why didn't he think of testing him when he took him in? If he had known earlier, he wouldn't have let Wanjing off so easily. Fortunately, it wasn't too late. It hadn't even been a month since he started school. There was still plenty of time in the future. The originally solemn atmosphere became somewhat subtle. Many Shen sect elders also looked at Chu Luiyue differently. Elder Wanjing also saw it. He had a headache. Chu Luiyue finally spoke when he began to think about how to dispel these people's thoughts that they shouldn't have. No. She shook her head and said seriously. The reason why this student was able to comprehend the Shen formation so quickly was all because of Senior Rong Xiu's good teachings and some luck. But in reality, this student's aptitude in this aspect is indeed average. Elder Wanjing heaved a sigh of relief. That's great. That's great. No matter how much credibility these words had, he would just take it as the truth. In any case, from these words, it could be seen that Chuyu still wanted to follow him to practice celestial physician. That was enough. He was satisfied, but Elder Huafeng and the others weren't willing to give up so easily. Hehe, Chuyu, don't be afraid. Our academy has always recruited the most outstanding students. The better the talent, the more diligent the cultivation, the better the treatment in the academy. You are only 16 years old now, but you can already comprehend the Shen formation to open the academy's barrier. It is truly rare. You said that you don't have any talent in this area? Do you believe it yourself? Elder Huafeng leaned leisurely on his chair, but his eyes were fixed on Chu Liwei, as if he had already seen through her. When you entered the academy, you only took the celestial physician examination. It was only natural that you became Wanjing's disciple. It's fine if you want to cultivate celestial physician, but if you deliberately hide your talent in other aspects because of this, there's no need. You have to know that there are many people in this world who can't have all these cultivation talents at the same time. He looked at her with a burning gaze. Chuyu, this is closely related to your future. You must think carefully. Wanjing wanted nothing more than to kick him. He was snatching a disciple right in front of him. Elder Huafeng automatically blocked Elder Wanjing's resentful gaze. Tsk, it was fine if he didn't know before, but now that he knew, how could he let Wanjing take advantage of him alone? This time he had to fight for it. Chu Liyue's eyelids twitched, feeling a little troubled. She really didn't expect that she would attract so much trouble just because she was worried about Rong Xiu and rushed out on a whim. Elder Huafeng and the others were all top-notch experts and had sharp eyes. Even if she said that, they wouldn't believe her so easily. If it were anyone else, they would be very happy to encounter such a situation. However, Chu Liyue had many concerns. It wasn't that she didn't want to learn from an expert like Elder Huafeng, but De Bao probably wouldn't agree. After all, she had been playing chess with De Bao for so long. In fact, she was cultivating as a Shen master. Moreover, her schedule was already full every day, so she really didn't have any extra time to deal with other things. After thinking for a while, she bowed solemnly to Elder Huafeng. Thank you for your kindness, Elder Huafeng, but this student's energy is limited. Elder Huafeng was stunned for a moment before falling into deep thought. That's true. A person's time and energy were limited, and being a Shen master and celestial physician required one to calm down and study carefully. If these two were to be done together, it might really be a little difficult. In that case, you still want to cultivate as a celestial physician? Elder Huafeng was rather disappointed. After all, this kid's talent as a Shen master was obvious to the naked eye. It would be a pity if he gave up just like that. Why don't you spare a few days every month to come to my place to read books, play chess, and study Shen formations? Elder Huafeng still didn't want to give up, so he took the initiative to compromise and looked at Chu Liyue expectantly. Rong Xiu raised his eyebrows slightly. It seemed that it wasn't without reason that some people were often cheated. If he was in such a hurry, who else could persuade him? As expected, he hadn't suffered enough in the past. Huafeng, since Chuyu has already said so, you should give up. No matter what, you have to respect the child's opinion, right? After confirming that his disciple wouldn't run away, Elder Wanjing was in a good mood. Can't you just let him refine pills properly? If he's dragged by you to learn Shen formations and in the end he breaks the barriers all over the academy like before? Before he could finish speaking, Elder Wanzheng suddenly realized that he had misspoken and immediately stopped. Elder Huafeng also felt a chill down his spine. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from the Love Network. Chapter 1205. The painful memories of the past appeared in front of his eyes, causing Elder Huafeng's heart to tremble. He subconsciously raised his eyes and looked at Chu Luiyue. Chu Luiyue blinked in confusion and smiled. Elder Huafeng, what's wrong? When she smiled, her originally delicate and clean eyebrows instantly became lively. Her eyes were like stars, cunning and intelligent. Elder Huafeng's head was aching. No, nothing. He took a deep breath. Well, since you want to specialize in celestial physician, then I'll listen to you. A trace of confusion flashed across Chu Luiyue's eyes. Just now, Elder Huafeng looked like he was determined to get it. Why did his attitude suddenly change? Elder Wanzheng didn't seem to have said anything, however, she instinctively felt that she shouldn't ask too much, so she bowed respectfully. Thank you, Elder Huafeng. Sigh. Elder Huafeng looked at her. He still felt a little unwilling in his heart, so he added hesitantly. If you want to learn Shen formations, you can come to this old man's place to take a look. Chu Luiyue's heart warmed slightly. She could tell that Elder Huafeng really wanted to take her in as a disciple so as not to waste her talent in this area. It was indeed a rare blessing to be able to receive such love from him. This student will remember Elder's instructions. Elder Huafeng looked at her again. He seemed to have thought of something and shook his head with a sigh. Chu Luiyue could clearly see that he wasn't looking at her. Instead, it was as if he was recalling someone through her. Hearing this, the other Shen masters and elders also stopped thinking. Elder Bo Yen rubbed his temples. He could now see that this Chu Yu was also a troublemaker. It was as if wherever he went, he would always stir up trouble. There was no time for peace. All right, let's leave this matter at that for now. Let's talk about the punishment when we come back. He looked around. The matter of the Venerable One Divine Artifact was really an accident. We can't blame him, so let's not talk about it. However, it was a big mistake for Chu Yu to secretly cross the Academy's barrier. Even if he helped Rong Xiu and protected the Venerable One Divine Artifact, it was not enough to make up for his crime. Moreover, this matter has already spread throughout the Academy, and the impact is extremely bad. He must be punished and warned as a warning others. After a moment of silence, an elder asked, in that case, how about we lock him up in Pengmin Mountain and let him reflect on his mistakes? Chu Luiyue's heart skipped a beat. That's not good, right? He was locked up on the second day of school and was only released 10 days ago. If he's locked up again, it's somewhat inappropriate. Immediately, some elders objected. Chuya, of course. However, if the punishment was too heavy, Elder Wanzheng would probably not bear it. What's more, the child didn't have any bad intentions. It was just a moment of impulse that led to the mistake. Locking him up in Pengmin Mountain is the most suitable choice at present. Anyway, he has already been there before. It doesn't matter if he goes again. As for the impact of being locked up continuously, he was locked up on the second day of school. Now that he did something like this, could it be worse? There were different opinions. Some agreed, some objected. Anyway, everyone had their own reasons. Among them, the one who objected the most was Elder Wanzheng. What a joke. How could he go to Pengmin Mountain again and again? Moreover, his precious disciple was about to break through to the 9th grade celestial physician. If he had not been interrupted today, he would have been showing off the 9th grade pill everywhere. How could he be reduced to arguing with this group of people here? If he was locked up for a while, wouldn't it be delayed again? No, I don't agree. Elder Wanzheng said angrily. Everyone looked at each other and fell into a stalemate. Wanzheng was the most protective. If he was really determined to oppose, they could not force it. However, at this moment, Chu Luiyue suddenly took a step forward. Master, I am willing to go to Pengmin Mountain to be punished. The room suddenly fell silent. Elder Wanzheng's face was filled with shock. Chu Yu, Master, this is my fault. I should bear the corresponding responsibility. If I hurt the harmony between you and the elders because of me, I will feel even more guilty. Chu Luiyue's tone was very sincere. Please let me go. Elder Wanzheng reacted and was very touched. This child. Even at this time, she still did not forget to think about me. This disciple, I did not take her in for nothing. Seeing his expression wavering, Chu Luiyue added another sentence. I promise that I will work hard in there and strive to break through as soon as possible. Maybe when I come out I will have fulfilled your wish? His wish was, of course, to let her break through to the 9th grade celestial physician as soon as possible. Good child, Elder Wanzheng was very comforted. You've suffered. In there it was difficult to protect oneself. How could she have the extra energy to cultivate? These words were just to comfort him. However, it was very rare for his disciple to have such a heart. Chu Luiyue shook her head. I didn't suffer. Hearing this, Elder Wanzheng's heart ached. Let's put those things aside. Take care of yourself first. Chu Luiyue's eyes lit up. Thank you, master. Rongxiu raised his eyebrows slightly. His thin lips curved slightly, and there was a hint of a smile on his noble and devilish face. It was really? Rongxiu's residence was on a remote mountain in the martial artist area. At this time, many people had gathered outside the mountain, waiting with curiosity and doubt. In a short time, the things that happened outside had spread throughout the academy. Now, everyone knew that the new student, Chu Yu, who had been in the academy for less than a month, had secretly broken out of the academy's barrier and fought with Jin Lei and the others outside. Of course, the matter of the venerable divine artifact was kept a secret because of the elders' strict precautions. So until now, the students subconsciously thought that the artifact must have returned to the academy. They did not pay much attention to it. After all, this matter was too bizarre and coincidental. It sounded fake. Therefore, everyone gathered here at this time, wanting to know how the elders planned to deal with the aftermath. That Chu Yu is really bold. He actually sneaked out. There were so many people fighting. Wasn't he afraid of dying there? Anyway, he came back alive. I heard that he even blocked a fatal blow for Senior Rongxiu. Doesn't this mean that he is friends with Senior Rongxiu in the future? Senior Rongxiu is a big shot. Even without him, nothing would have happened. But sneaking out is a big taboo in the academy. The elders have already gathered over there. They should be discussing how to deal with him, right? I wonder if he will be expelled. No matter what, he is Elder Wanzheng's disciple. As long as Elder Wanzheng protects him, I think he will be punished at most. Everyone was discussing. Somewhere, Jiang Jiwan looked at the mountain peak and muttered with a complicated expression, Chu Yu? That Chu Yu, how did he get out? A better reading experience came from the Love Network. Chapter 1206. Yes, she didn't care how the elders punished Chu Yu in the end, nor did she care about the situation of the battle outside. There was only one point that she was concerned about. How did Chu Yu, a rank 7 warrior, get out? One had to know that Elder Bo Yin had specifically instructed them not to worry and to go back and wait peacefully. The academy elders would settle those matters. After that, they even strengthened the academy's barrier to prevent anyone from sneaking out. But under such circumstances, Chu Yu went out. And he even blocked a blow for Rongxiu? From the beginning to the end, this matter was strange and she couldn't help but be filled with suspicion. Maybe he sneaked out with one of the elders? Liang Xiaoxiao, who was standing at the side, said with some uncertainty. Jiang Jiwan's mouth twitched. Do you think that if he really did that, the elders wouldn't find out? Liang Xiaoxiao choked. Then what else can we do? He seems to be only at the middle of rank 7, right? Even if his actual combat strength is higher than his cultivation base, it can't be so exaggerated to be able to pass through the academy's barrier alone, right? That's something that even we can't do. Let alone him? Jiang Jiwan frowned. This was also the point that she found the strangest. The only possible explanation was that Chu Yu took advantage of the chaos to forcefully pass through the barrier. But for some reason the elders didn't seem to have discovered him in time and brought him back. Normally, if anyone passed through the barrier without permission, it would immediately attract the attention of the guardian elders. But Chu Yu succeeded and, in that chaotic battle, he even helped Rongxiu. It was a pity that she didn't see it with her own eyes. Forget it, there's no point in us thinking so much. If he really made a mistake, the elders will punish him. Liang Xiaoxiao didn't think that there was anything to be concerned about. What exactly is going on? Won't we know when Chu Yu's punishment is out? Jiang Jiwan could only nod. Everyone waited for a while more before they finally saw people walking out of the mountain peak. The elders are out. The crowd was in an uproar and they all looked over with rapt attention. First, several elders walked out in a single file. After they walked out, they didn't stop and went their separate ways. Thus, everyone turned their attention to the person who came out from the back. When most of the elders had left, finally, a few special figures appeared. The person at the front was tall and slender, wearing a white brocade robe. Even though there was still some distance between them, it still couldn't hide her peerless beauty. Was Rongxiu. Following closely behind him was a young man. Needless to say, that person was Chuyu. The two of them walked out one after another. Beside him were Elder Wan Zheng and Elder Bo Yen. The other elders all left separately. Only these few people came out and stood still as if they were talking about something. Jiang Jiwan stared at him. If it weren't for the fact that Rongxiu's mountain was surrounded by an extremely complicated barrier that he had personally set up all year round, she would have gone forward to listen to what they were talking about. After a while, Elder Wanzheng patted Chuyu's shoulder and left with Elder Bo Yen and Elder Bo Yen. Now only Rongxiu and Chuyu were left. The two of them stood facing each other. Even though the people waiting outside couldn't hear what they were talking about, they had to admit that when the two of them stood together, they were unexpectedly harmonious. The forest was lush and the young master was like jade. Logically speaking, Chuyu's appearance couldn't be compared to Rongxiu's, but the aura around him was rare. This allowed him to stand in front of Rongxiu without being at a disadvantage. Why did the elders leave? Don't they plan to punish Chuyu? It shouldn't be. Even if Chuyu had a meritorious performance this time, the elders have repeatedly ordered that he can't go out as he pleases. If he doesn't get punished in the end, wouldn't that be letting everyone do what they want? That's right. And why did senior brother Rongxiu and Elder Bo Yen stand there and talk for so long? I don't know what they're talking about. Although everyone was filled with curiosity, they didn't dare to barge in and could only secretly guess. Let's go, I'll send you over. Rongxiu raised his chin, and a hint of a smile flashed across his eyes. You should be tired of waiting. Chu Liwei blinked and laughed. Senior brother Rongxiu really knows my situation like the back of his hand. Rongxiu raised his eyebrows. Don't call me that. Chu Liwei relied on the fact that he was much taller than him and could completely cover himself. He wasn't afraid of being seen by the people outside, so he became more and more presumptuous. I entered the school a few years later than you, shouldn't I call you senior brother? Rongxiu chuckled, took a step closer, lowered his voice and teased, You have your own way of calling me, why do you have to be the same as others? Chu Liwei glanced at him with a smile, then took the lead to turn around and said leisurely, Senior brother Rongxiu, let's go quickly. I don't dare to take up too much of your time, or else I'll be criticized later. Rongxiu strode forward with his long legs and caught up with him. I didn't know that after coming to Lingxiao College, you've become so timid. Chu Liwei snorted lightly. How am I timid? I'm just speaking the truth. Let's not talk about other things just now, there are many people watching my every move. She curled the corners of her lips. Believe it or not, as long as I make the slightest mistake or show the slightest bit of offense to you, they will seize the opportunity to criticize me without restraint. For the next period of time, I still want to cultivate in peace in the school. In the hearts of those people, Rongxiu was definitely not as simple as a powerful senior brother. His outstanding talent and strength had already become an existence that countless people looked up to and longed to catch up to. His name firmly occupied the Qingyan role and became the symbol of the strong. Chu Liwei felt that it was better for her to be more honest. Rongxiu suddenly laughed and slowly said, That's right. So you want to quietly study and cultivate in the school? I really didn't see that. Chu Liu's face heated up slightly. There was no way to refute this. She had only been in the school for slightly more than 20 days, but she had already caused so much trouble. No matter who saw it, she was a person who didn't know her place. But, Rongxiu slightly dragged the end of his words and lowered his voice as if he was whispering in her ear, If you really want to offend me, I'm waiting for you. Chu Liwei stopped in her tracks and turned to look at him. No matter what his identity was, his thick skin and temperament had not changed at all. Rongxiu. Huh? Do you really think that I won't dare to do anything to you in front of those people? Rongxiu looked at her and suddenly smiled. He answered with great anticipation, You're most welcome. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 1207. Chu Liwei, Admit Defeat. Sure enough, in this aspect, she shouldn't have wishfully thought of winning against someone. The two of them headed towards Pingmin Mountain. At this time, the crowd waiting in the distance finally realized something. The direction they are heading towards seems to be Pingmin Mountain? Could it be that the elders want to lock Chuyu up there? It can't be. Hasn't Chuyu been locked up once before and he just came out not long ago? Even if the elders want to punish him, it doesn't seem appropriate to choose this place. What's wrong with this? He did something wrong, so it's only right for him to be punished. Could it be that just because he went there not long ago, he can be exempted from punishment? That's true. It seems that senior brother Rongxiu is responsible for bringing him there. However, why do the two of them seem to be chatting happily? Actually, I think so too. Just now, senior brother Rongxiu seemed to be smiling. Did you see that? I heard that he has a cold and arrogant personality, and usually doesn't even like to talk much. Why is his attitude towards that Chuyu so good now? Haven't you heard? That Chuyu helped senior brother Rongxiu block a blow before. How can ordinary people compare? It's not strange that senior brother Rongxiu would treat him like this. Jiang Jiwan looked at the two figures that were getting further and further away, bit her lips, and turned to leave. With the previous experience and Rongxiu's lead, Chu Luiyue quickly arrived at Pingmin Mountain this time. When she arrived at the mountain, she looked at Rongxiu with some surprise. Why do I feel that you seem to be very familiar with this place? From Rongxiu's residence to here, the distance was actually not close. But on the way here, Rongxiu led the way without any hesitation, and took her to the most convenient path. Chu Luiyue even felt that he should have been here more than once. Sure enough, Rongxiu nodded. I've been here a few times. Chu Luiyue laughed. Who would have thought that the outstanding senior brother Rongxiu would actually come to this place? Don't tell me you did something wrong and got locked up in here? Rongxiu gave her a meaningful look. Thanks to a certain someone, he had been here many times. I've been to most of the places in the academy. Pingmin Mountain was nothing. You, on the other hand, seem to have always wanted to come here. What's the fun in here? Chu Luiyue didn't say much to Rongxiu because all the elders were present. However, she did not hide it. She nodded frankly and looked at Mount Pingmin in front of her. Yes. I don't know why, but I keep feeling that cultivating here seems to be faster and more comfortable. Rongxiu's eyesight was better than others and his mind was smart. Even if she didn't say anything, he could see it. The density of the force in Mount Pingmin is the same as the outside world. But since you like it here, then, it's up to you. Rongxiu smiled and didn't seem to have the intention to continue asking. Go. See you in a month. This time, as a warning, Chu Luiyue was given a month's time. Elder Wanzheng was originally against it, but he accepted it under Chu Luiyue's persuasion. However, he nagged Elder Bo Yen for a long time because of this. Chu Luiyue was a little surprised. You'll still be staying in the academy for a month? Rongxiu nodded. Yes. I have some things to deal with here. Chu Luiyue thought for a moment and asked tentatively. Is it related to that venerable artifact? This matter was very big and many first-rate sects were involved. Rongxiu killed Jin Lei with his own hands, so there would be a tug-of-war between these parties. Suddenly, she thought of something and looked at Rongxiu in shock. Wait, you deliberately made me stay here for a month? That's right, this 1 month's time limit was actually proposed by Rongxiu. At first, Elder Bo Yen wanted to lock her up for half a month, but Rongxiu said that this matter had a serious impact, and if it wasn't dealt with properly, there would be a lot of trouble in the future. He might as well lock her up for a month. Then all the rumors in the academy would disappear automatically. Moreover, he could use this opportunity to grind down Chu Luiyue's youthful and hot-headed temper. Elder Bo Yen felt that it made sense, so he agreed. At first, Chu Luiyue thought that Rongxiu only said it because he guessed that she wanted to go to Mount Pingmin, but now it seemed that he had planned it long ago. You don't have to worry about those trivial matters. Rongxiu said calmly. With me around, no one can find trouble with you. Of course Chu Luiyue would be in trouble. That venerable divine weapon was snatched back by everyone with great effort, but in the end, it fell into her hands and recognized her as its master. If the people from the Golden Wing sect and the other sects really wanted to pursue the matter, she would definitely be involved in it. Chu Luiyue felt something surging in her heart, but she also felt that there were some things between them that didn't need to be said. They both understood each other. It was as if with this man around, she didn't need to worry about him even if she caused a huge disaster. He would naturally take care of it. He was the only one who could give her such a sense of security. She suppressed these thoughts and her red lips curled up into a bright smile. Then we'll meet in a month's time. Rongxiu was infected by her smile, and his thin lips curled up slightly. Okay. Chu Luiyue walked forward. But after taking 2 steps, she seemed to have suddenly thought of something and turned back. Right, there's something? Rongxiu nodded, indicating for her to speak directly. Chu Luiyue hesitated for a moment, lowered her voice slightly and asked. Rongxiu, do you know the student whose name was erased from the Azure Cloud roll? Rongxiu's hands behind his back slowly clenched, but his expression was still as indifferent as before. I do. What's wrong? Have you been to her herb garden? Herb garden? Yes, it's the one that the dean specially left for her? Chu Luiyue asked with some uncertainty. It's the dean's work, right? Yes, I've been there before, but it was sealed, so I didn't go there again. You went there? Chu Luiyue shook her head with a smile. How could I enter that place? The elders are guarding it very strictly. I just happened to see it from afar when I went to the Medicine Wind Valley to get the herbs. Rong Xiu's tensed body slightly relaxed. Actually, the herbs inside are not much different from the Medicine Wind Valley. It doesn't matter if I go or not. Chu Luiyue shook her head. No, I feel that there's something wrong with that herb garden. Rong Xiu's brows moved slightly as he looked at her eyes. What's wrong? Chu Luiyue paused for a moment. I saw a large patch of dancing lotus blooming over there. This thing is extremely precious, it's already very rare to see one or two, but there are so many. The dancing lotus only blooms once every few hundred years, it's really inconceivable to get so many. Rong Xiu heaved a sigh of relief. It's not that difficult. Chu Luiyue was stunned and narrowed her eyes. How do you know? Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from the Love Network. Chapter 1208. The two of them faced each other and there was a moment of silence. Then Rong Xiu smiled and said casually, the dancing lotus is indeed an extremely rare treasure in the Tianling Empire, but in the Divine Ruins world, it's much easier to obtain this thing. Many aristocratic families with thousands of years of history will even send people to plant and nurture it. Lingxiao College has tens of thousands of years of history, so it's really not a big deal to have these. He spoke tirelessly and calmly, with a kind of power that made people unconsciously believe him. There are only a few scattered plants in the Medicine Wind Valley because the Medicine Wind Valley occupies a very large area and has countless kinds of herbs. The elders in charge of guarding it are responsible for all of them, so they naturally won't put all their attention on one kind of herb. After all, there are some more precious herbs in the Medicine Wind Valley. Chu Luiyue frowned. That does make sense. Although the dancing lotus is good, it's extremely picky about the environment it grows in. Moreover, it requires a long time of careful care. It's actually very energy-consuming and patient. She murmured and shrugged. To be able to grow so many dancing lotuses, that person must really like it. Rong Xiu paused and asked with a smile, You don't like it? I like it. Chu Luiyue nodded. If she didn't like it, she wouldn't have paid special attention to this matter. If only I had the chance to go in and take a look. But, it's probably impossible. Chu Luiyue said regretfully. First of all, that herb garden was someone else's private place. Secondly, that person was no longer in the academy. Most importantly, from the current situation, that person seemed to be in existence that couldn't be mentioned in the academy. It was even more difficult to go to the herb garden that she left behind back then. Forget it. I'll go in first. Chu Luiyue put away her thoughts, waved at Rong Xiu and turned towards Mao Pingmin. She took out her black jade token and threw it out. Buzz. The black jade token made contact with the barrier, producing a slight fluctuation. An entrance slowly opened. Chu Luiyue stepped in. When her figure completely disappeared within the barrier, Rong Xiu hovered in midair for a long time before muttering to himself in a low voice. Naturally, that day will come. That was planted for you in the first place. Then he finally turned around and left. You again. Chu Luiyue had just stood in front of the seventh tower when he heard a familiar old voice. It was rare for Chu Luiyue to feel embarrassed. He coughed to cover it up, cupped his hands and bowed respectfully. Student Chu Yu greets elder. Long time no see, how have you been, elder? You've only been gone for 10 days. Is that considered a long time? The other party spoke very straightforwardly with a hint of disdain. Chu Luiyue. Elder, you're right. Come in. Chu Luiyue thanked him again before stepping forward and pushing the door open. Everything in the hall was the same as when she had left. Of course, it was only 10 days in between. This was normal. The door closed automatically behind her. The 7 doors glowed brightly and floated quietly in front of her. Bo Yin has already told me about you. You're a troublemaker. You've only been out for a few days and you're back? Chu Luiyue lowered her head slightly and admitted her mistake. You're right. It's all my fault. Probably because her attitude was good, the other party didn't keep interrogating her. Alright, there's no point in saying this. If you really want to admit your mistake, take action in the future. Chu Luiyue obediently said, yes. The process is the same as before. Choose. The other party spoke for a while and went straight to the point. Chu Luiyue raised her eyes and looked at the 7 doors in front of her. Her gaze swept across the doors one by one. From the outside, these doors were completely the same. Even the aura and pressure emitted from them were the same. But there seemed to be some kind of force guiding them. She raised her hand and pointed at the third door on the left. I choose this. The hall was silent. But the air seemed to have frozen for a moment. Although that feeling was fleeting, Chu Liwei was still very sharp. At this moment, she was sure that she had chosen the previous one. As expected, a low and slightly doubtful voice sounded in her ears. Are you sure? Chu Liwei suppressed the fluctuations in her heart and said calmly, I'm sure. After Rong Xiu sent Chu Liwei to Mount Pingmin, he returned to his residence. Unlike ordinary students, he lived alone on a mountain. This treatment was the same as the elders of the academy. Of course, no one had any objections to this. If anyone had the same talent and ability as him, they would also do the same. Before he reached the door, Rong Xiu seemed to have noticed something and stopped in his tracks. He stared at the room in front of him and walked forward. Back in the room, he closed the door, then walked around the screen and went inside. It was unknown when Dugu Mabao had appeared here. Senior. Rong Xiu clasped his fist and bowed. Dugu Mabao looked at him coldly. She was locked up in Mount Pingmin again? Rong Xiu nodded. 1 month. Humph. Dugu Mabao's face was even colder. You are very generous to let her go just like that. Rong Xiu raised his eyes slightly, and there seemed to be a glimmer of light in his deep eyes. He smiled slightly and said lightly, that is? She naturally wants to go there. Digression, wishing the motherland prosperity. Happy National Day. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from the Love Network. Chapter 1209. Pingmin Mountain, 7th Tower. After a short silence, the voice finally sounded again. Since you have chosen, just go in. Chu Liyue's heart moved. This time she was not asked to choose again. She smiled, thanked him and walked towards the door. When her hand was just on the door, the man suddenly asked, Did you come here on purpose this time? Chu Liyue's slightly lowered eyes flashed with a faint light. When she raised her eyes again, it had returned to calmness. Elder, what do you mean? She asked in surprise, with a trace of confusion on her face. After a pause, the voice sounded. It's okay, you can go in. The tone was calm. Chu Liyue nodded and did not ask any more questions. She pushed the door open and entered. Click. The door was closed. In the hall, silence was restored. After a long time, a faintly discernible low voice rang out. I'm probably old and confused. This was purely an accident. If that kid really had the ability to plan such a big scheme, it would be too amazing. Now it seemed that he was thinking too much. However, Chu seemed to be really fated with that person. The first time was a coincidence, the second time was a coincidence. Then, what about the third time? Maybe it's time to check this child's background. Chu Liyue did not know anything about these things outside. But at this time she was too lazy to care about those things. Because she just wanted to stay in this place and cultivate. Looking at the messy lines on the 4 walls, Chu Liyue felt inexplicably familiar. It was clearly the second time she came here and it was only a few days apart, but it felt like she had not seen it for a long time. Chu Liyue took a deep breath. The surrounding power silently surged and rotated around her, as if it had been missing her for a long time. Chu Liyue was slightly stunned. For a moment, something seemed to flash through her mind. But this feeling quickly disappeared, and before she could grasp it and figure out what it was, it had already disappeared. She shook her head to clear her head. Then she sat down cross-legged and began to cultivate. Almost as soon as she closed her eyes and concentrated, circulating the origin power in her body, the energy around her rushed into her body. Chu Liyue's aura began to rise at an extraordinary speed. Sigh. Elder Wanjing sighed again. Elder Huafeng finally couldn't take it anymore and spoke up. Wanjing, you've been sighing ever since you came back. Can you stop being like this? Just listening to it makes me annoyed. Elder Wanjing lifted his eyelids, lazily glancing at him. Sigh, what do you know? It wasn't your disciple who was locked up. Wanjing, let me tell you, if you continue to speak like this, there's no need for us to continue this conversation. Elder Huafeng pretended to leave. Don't mock me like this. Even at this time, how could he not forget to show off? No matter how you talk, Chuyu is already locked up. Can you persuade Bo Yen to let him go? However, Elder Wanjing didn't fall for his trick and snorted. 1 month. Do you know how much I can teach him in 1 month? A good seedling was wasted just like that. What can we do? Things have already come to this. Elder Huafeng stroked his beard. However, I think you shouldn't always sigh like this. Can't you think on the bright side? Actually, if you think about it carefully, that kid didn't lose out on this trip. Do you think anyone has the chance to obtain a venerable artifact? Even they didn't have such a treasure. That's true. Speaking of this, Elder Wanzheng's face finally showed some joy. His talent is already good. With this, it can be said that he's like a tiger that has grown wings. This is a good thing, but don't be too happy too early. Elder Huafeng shook his head. Possessing a treasure is a crime. With such a treasure on Chuyu, it's inevitable that some people will be jealous. Originally, this thing should have belonged to the academy. In the end, it became Chuyu's. It was fine if the students didn't know, but the elders might not all be convinced. During this period of time, he will be imprisoned in Min Mountain. Although he will suffer a little, at least he will be safe. But when he comes out, Elder Huafeng's face showed some worry. Hearing this, Elder Wanzheng suddenly laughed. Ah, don't worry. These aren't problems. That kid has a backer. Oh? It seems that this kid's background is also unusual? I knew it, that kid's words and actions don't seem like a child from an ordinary family. No, I don't know his background. Elder Wanzheng smiled and shook his head, saying mysteriously, I only know that even if he really causes a bigger disaster than this, his life will still be in danger. Someone will definitely protect him to the end. Elder Huafeng was stunned when he heard this, and his face became serious. What do you mean by this? Elder Wanzheng chuckled, but he wasn't willing to reveal any more. I can't talk about this matter anymore. But you only need to know that the kid looks gentle and harmless and has no background, but in fact, he is a real iron plate. If anyone wants to find trouble with him, Fiske, you're just courting death. The news that Chu Luiyue was imprisoned in Min Mountain for a month quickly spread in the academy. Everyone had different reactions. Some were worried, some were gloating. Even those who disdained this name before had to start to re-examine it at this time. This freshman is so troublesome. In fact, it also proves that he is unusual from the side, right? If he didn't have any real ability, how could he survive that fierce battle? Not to mention, it was rumored that he even blocked a blow for Rong Xiu. In addition, he defeated the level 8 warrior, Lu Ziyan, as a rank 7 warrior. Everything was showing that this new student had more potential than anyone had expected. But no matter what, after this incident, Chu Luiyue finally became famous in the academy. The name, Chu Yu, began to be known by everyone, and for a period of time, it became the topic of everyone's conversation. But this situation didn't last for long, because something even more eye-catching happened. The sect master of the Golden Wing sect, Jin Minyao, personally came to the academy. Donghuang Bell Tower, 3rd floor hall. The atmosphere was solemn. There were 2 rows of chairs in the hall. Elder Bo Yen sat at the head seat on the right, and beside him were the other elders of the academy. Sitting opposite him was a middle-aged man with a well-built body. He had a square face with black stubble and wore a black robe. He sat there with a majestic aura. This person was the sect master of the Golden Wing sect, Jin Minyao. With a sullen face, he questioned, So, your academy doesn't intend to give an explanation for the death of my beloved disciple? Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from the Love Network. Chapter 12:10. Elder Bo Yen suppressed the anger in his heart and explained. Sect leader Jin, I've already made it clear to you just now. This matter is not Lingxiao College's fault. You can only blame that disciple of yours for being too greedy. Logically speaking, that divine artifact belongs to my Spirit Firmament Academy. However, due to the appearance of Gray Feather's Abyss, there were many people who wanted it, so we didn't say much. However, after that item fell into our hands, Jin Lei still pursued it relentlessly. In the end, he even chased it all the way to Fang State City. A trace of anger appeared on Elder Bo Yan's face, and his voice rose a little. Sect leader Jin, I don't think I need to explain what kind of place Fang State City is, right? He came to our territory to cause trouble. Do you expect us to be polite? Jin Minyao snorted coldly. Even so, you could have just taught him a lesson. Why did you have to be so ruthless? How was it us who was ruthless? It was clearly Jin Lei who was seeking his own death. Elder Bo Yen was so angry that he laughed. From the beginning to the end, he was the one who urged the people from the other sects to join forces with him to deal with Lingxiao College. In the end, when he saw that the situation was hopeless, he tried to kidnap our disciple. He didn't hesitate to burn the power of his bloodline to snatch the sacred weapon. Hearing this, a trace of shock flashed across Jean Minyao's face. Obviously, he didn't know that Jean Lei was so determined to snatch the sacred weapon. He didn't even hesitate to use his own life as a stake to fight for it. Even if we don't kill him, he won't be able to live anymore. Elder Bo Yen reprimanded coldly. It was rare for Jean Minyao to be speechless. He paused for a moment before retorting. He was in the wrong in this matter, but he didn't deserve to die. Now that he died in Fang's state, I have to at least bring his corpse back. Otherwise, how can I explain it to everyone in the sect? And the person who killed my beloved disciple must also be found. A debt of blood must be paid in blood. This time, even the other elders present couldn't bear to listen to it. However, before they could speak, they heard a voice from outside the door. I killed Jean Lei. This voice was cold and noble, and it revealed a sense of arrogance, causing others to unconsciously become nervous upon hearing it. Everyone turned around to look. A tall and slender figure appeared in front of everyone. Elder Bo Yen asked, Rongxiu, why are you here? Jean Minyao was stunned at first, then he narrowed his eyes dangerously. Yintian Tower. Rongxiu? This matter is related to me, so of course I have to come. Rongxiu gave Elder Bo Yen a reassuring look and stepped into the room. He walked to the innermost position and faced Jean Minyao. Jean Lei tried to harm me, so it's only right for me to kill him instead. Why, Sect Master Jean? Are you going to seek justice for him? Jean Minyao's expression turned ugly. He only knew that Jean Lei had been killed in Fangzhou City, but he didn't know who it was. He originally thought that it was one of the elders of Lingxiao College, but who knew that the culprit was Rongxiu? To be honest, he would rather offend the elders of Lingxiao College than become enemies with Rongxiu. This was because Rongxiu was a ruthless character. He had no background and was bullied constantly, but after enduring for several years, he was able to ascend to the position of the Son of God and control the Yuntian Tower in his own hands. Just from this alone, one could tell what kind of person he was. Moreover, although Lingxiao College had a strong foundation and was powerful, it was still a college. When faced with problems, there were too many shackles and it was bound by many restrictions. When one part of the body was affected, Lingxiao College would often choose a gentler way to deal with the problem. This was also one of the reasons why he dared to visit them directly this time. However, the Yuntian Tower was different. In the past few years, after Rongxiu ascended to the position of the Son of God, he had made a lot of moves. The combat power of the soldiers under his command was also very strong. He had no doubt that as long as Rongxiu gave the order, the entire Yuntian Tower would become a sharp sword in his hand. At his beck and call, Jean Minyao took a deep breath. Rongxiu, I know that you are powerful. But you killed my disciple just like that. Don't you have anything to show for it? Rongxiu put one hand behind his back and looked very calm. His thin lips were slightly curved, but there was no smile in his eyes, only coldness. So what if I killed him? There was no superfluous explanation, only this simple and straightforward answer. Oh, as for his corpse, don't think about it, Sect Master Jean. He died in Ai's hands and there was nothing left of him at that time. Rongxiu said indifferently. Jean Minyao finally couldn't hold back anymore. He slammed the table and suddenly stood up. Rongxiu, don't go too far. Rongxiu looked at him coldly. Elder Bo Yen also stepped forward and reprimanded, Sect Master Jean, don't forget where you are. Although they didn't want to completely fall out with the Golden Wing sect, if the other party kept doing this, then there was nothing to say. Jean Minyao suppressed his anger and changed the topic. The person who fought with Jean Lei for the divine weapon isn't here now, right? Rongxiu narrowed his eyes dangerously. Elder Bo Yen and the others were also stunned. Jean Minyao sneered. Although I wasn't there at that time, I wasn't completely ignorant. There are some things that I am very clear about. A large part of the reason why Jean Lei died in the end was because of the person who fought with him for the divine weapon at the last moment. If it wasn't for that person, Jean Lei wouldn't have had to burn the power of his bloodline, and the things that happened later wouldn't have happened. His eyes swept across everyone with a gloomy gaze. As long as you hand over that person, we'll write this matter off. Pengmin Mountain. Time passed slowly. Chu Luiyue sat cross-legged and focused on cultivating. The surrounding force continuously flowed into her body. The aura around her body kept rising. This time, she could clearly sense that when she cultivated here, her condition was indeed different from when she was outside. The force here seemed to be inexhaustible, and it could subtly merge with her body. Not only could it quickly enter her body, it could also smoothly flow between her limbs and bones, becoming her own strength. Of course, this force eventually gathered in her dantian. The water droplet floated silently. 7 lines were engraved on it, becoming brighter and brighter. In here, Chu Luiyue almost forgot about the time. When Chu Luiyue closed her eyes and focused on cultivating, the lines on the 4 walls started to come alive again. They moved with Chu Luiyue's breathing in a strange rhythm. The power in her body was accumulating more and more. At a certain moment, a crisp shattering sound was suddenly heard. Chu Luiyue was stunned, and then she was surprised to find that the sound came from the Black Pyramid. It was probably because the power kept surging around it back and forth, causing it to shatter. Looking at the sudden appearance of the 4th crack, a scene suddenly appeared in Chu Luiyue's mind. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 12:11. That was a cliff. There was an octagonal pavilion on the cliff. Chu Luiyue frowned slightly. She was very familiar with this scene, because she had seen it more than once. She still remembered that she and Rongxiu had played chess here. It was also here that the two of them had agreed to wait for her to return to Tianling to discuss the marriage contract with her father. However, Chu Luiyue quickly realized that this time, the scene was much clearer than before. More importantly, she was finally able to see the scenery around the cliff. She seemed to be standing in the octagonal pavilion again. Looking around, the surrounding mountains were undulating, verdant and lush. At the bottom of the cliff, there was a blue river meandering past. She vaguely felt that this place was somewhat familiar, as if she had seen it somewhere before. Then, she walked to the edge of the octagonal pavilion and looked in another direction. Suddenly, her movements froze. Looking at the scenery in the distance, her heart beat violently. It was a lake that was surrounded by mountains. For some reason, the terrain of the lake was not low. Looking from here, it was almost at the same level as the mountainsides of the mountains. In addition, the mountain peak she was on was particularly high, so although the mountain range in front of her stretched out, it did not affect her vision. This allowed her to clearly see the lake water and the surrounding scenery from here. The brilliant sun poured down, and the blue waves rippled and sparkled. On top of it, there were translucent light pink flowers blooming. Some of them quietly floated on the surface of the water, swaying with the waves. Some branches spread out and swayed in the wind. Beside the lake, there were some other types of medicinal herbs. They seemed to be full of vitality, and it was obvious that they were taken care of very well. The faint white mist lingered, making everything seem even more ethereal and immortal. Everything was as beautiful as a fantasy. Chu Luiyue opened her mouth, but she did not know what to say for a moment. Only deep shock was left in her heart. Almost at the instant she saw that scene, she understood that it must be the medicinal garden. So this is what it looks like. So standing here, you can see such a scenery when you raise your head. Chu Luiyue looked around again. She suddenly remembered the location of this cliff in the academy. This was the area where mystic cultivators and celestial physician were connected. It was not far from Medicine Wind Valley in a straight line, but due to the terrain, one had to take a big detour to get there. Most people would beat around the bush. But she wouldn't. Because she had been to that medicinal garden. Donghuang Clock Tower. Because of Jean Minyao's sudden suggestion, the entire hall fell into silence. Silently, there seemed to be a gust of cold murderous intent spreading out. Everyone present was a top-notch expert. Naturally, they quickly detected the source of the killing intent, Rongxiu. His expression didn't change much, but it inexplicably made people feel frightened. Sect head Jean. Rongxiu spoke with a cold and indifferent tone, and it actually seemed to be even colder than his usual cold and cheerless tone. Jean Lei's death was his just desserts. If you continue to pester me, I will be waiting for you at the Yuntian Tower. Jean Minyao was shocked. Only then did he realize the seriousness of the matter. What does Rongxiu mean by this? The corner of his mouth twitched. Rongxiu, are you provoking me? For an insignificant person? He had made it very clear just now. As long as they handed that person over, he wouldn't pursue the matter any further. But looking at Rongxiu's reaction, it was as if he had made up his mind to protect that person. Jean Minyao was curious. Interesting. I wonder who that person is to make the holy son of the Yuntian Tower so protective? Rongxiu's thin lips curled into a cold smile. It's someone you can't afford to offend. You? Jean Minyao's expression changed. But looking at Rongxiu's cold and stern eyes, he didn't seem to be joking. He couldn't help but hesitate. At this moment, Elder Bo Yen also took a step forward, and his aura spread out. Sect head Jean, do you still want to continue today's matter? The warning was self-evident. Jin Minyao frowned. This was Lingxiao College's territory. He came here alone. If they really fought, he was no match for these people. After thinking about it, he finally decided to give in. Fine. Since you're so protective then, I'll let him go this time. But I'll investigate that person's identity thoroughly, if we meet in the future. He snorted coldly. It's time for him to pay his debts. With that, he waved his sleeves fiercely and strode out of the door. Sect head Jin. Rong Xiu suddenly called out to him. Jin Minyao stood still and turned around impatiently. But he saw Rong Xiu's face suddenly bloom with an extremely faint smile. You can try. Jin Minyao left angrily. Everyone in the hall felt that they had vented their anger. They looked at Rong Xiu with more admiration and gratification. Elder Bo Yin glanced at Rong Xiu and hesitated. He actually wanted to ask what was the relationship between Rong Xiu and that Chuyu. Brothers? Rong Xiu's mother seemed to have only given birth to him. Not long after, his mother's side of the family did not seem to have any other relatives. Friends? But they seemed to be closer than that. At the very least, he had never seen Rong Xiu get angry for anyone else. But now, as long as it involved Chuning, it seemed to easily affect his emotions. This was really strange. Teacher and friend? That seemed to be close. Otherwise, Rong Xiu would not have been able to teach Chuning how to open the school's barrier. Elder Bo Yin thought about it and came up with an answer. These two people should be able to get along well. Rong Xiu's personality had always been like this. It was extremely difficult for others to get close to him. But when he was with Chuyu, he seemed to be especially relaxed and let down his guard. Seeing that Chuyu was willing to risk his life to help Rong Xiu, the two of them should be very close. Elder Bo Yin did not ask in the end. The crowd quickly dispersed. Rong Xiu also returned to his residence. In the blink of an eye, it was the beginning of the month again. The school's monthly assessment was held as usual. Just like before, a few new students were recruited, while the older students continued to take the assessment. After a month, Luo Shirsher and the others had basically adapted to life in the school, and they had all achieved good results in their respective assessments. But because Chu Luiwei had not appeared for a long time, they were not in a good mood. Sigh, if only Chuyu was here. Zhuosheng touched his chin and said regretfully. Without him it feels a little boring. I originally wanted to see how his assessment results were this time. Too many things had happened in the past month, and now they were very clear that the kid had hidden his true strength. Originally, they wanted to find an opportunity to ask him about it. Unfortunately, he was locked up in Mount Pengmin again. I heard that the environment in Mount Pengmin is harsh and the punishment is harsh. I wonder how he is doing there now, Luo Shirsher muttered. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from the Love Network. Chapter 12:12. Shirsher, I don't think you should be too worried. That kid caused such a huge mess, but he was only locked up in Min Mountain for a month. He's already very lucky. Moreover, I heard from Elder Wanzheng that he was about to break through to become a 9th-grade celestial physician, but he was delayed by the incident that day. However, when he comes out, it shouldn't take long for him to break through. Luo Yinming was very open-minded about this matter. He looked up at the Azure Cloud leaderboard. Maybe after a while, he'll be able to enter the Azure Cloud leaderboard. When that time comes, it won't be right if we're still not there. That's true. Shirsher, we have to hurry up and cultivate. Zhuosheng said in agreement. Luo Shirsher pursed her lips slightly and nodded seriously. At the same time in the Donghuang Bell Tower, Elder Bo Yin and the others gathered here again. Together with them were a few students who participated in the fight for the venerable divine weapon. Everyone sat down in their respective seats, but there was a strange look on their faces. Everyone's here. Rong Xiu, you said that you had something important to announce. Can you say it now? Elder Bo Yin looked at Rong Xiu. That's right. The reason why they were here today was because Rong Xiu had gathered them. Ordinary students did not have the right to do so. However, Rong Xiu was different. Moreover, from the conversation between Elder Bo Yin and Rong Xiu, he could vaguely tell that this matter seemed to be related to the venerable divine weapon, so he did not dare to delay and called everyone here. Among them were a few students who had left a few days ago. I thought that Elder Bo Yin had some urgent matter to discuss with us, so I rushed back without stopping. Who knew that it was actually because of Rong Xiu? In the quiet room, a sarcastic voice rang out. Wei Shiping leaned back in his chair with a mocking look on his face. I really didn't expect that Rong Xiu's position in the academy is already higher than many of the elders, to the point where he can order us around as he pleases? Wei Shiping. Elder Bo Yen frowned. What we're going to talk about today is related to the Blue Feather Abyss. That's why I summoned all of you back. You don't have to target Rongxiu like this. Wei Shiping felt disdain in his heart as he laughed lazily. That matter? Wasn't it already over? Rongxiu had single-handedly turned the tide and snatched back the treasure. It could be said that he had contributed greatly. What does it have to do with us? The atmosphere became even colder. Everyone could hear the mockery and sarcasm in his words. Many people looked at Rongxiu. Unexpectedly, Rongxiu didn't seem to be angry. Instead, a meaningful smile appeared on his face. He looked at Wei Shiping and said, "It's true that this matter doesn't have much to do with the others, but it is inextricably linked to you." Wei Shiping's heart skipped a beat. "Rongxiu, what do you mean by that?" Rongxiu said indifferently, "That day Elder Shu Feng and the others set up a barrier and forcefully opened up space, preparing to return to the academy directly. This was a plan that the elders had made long ago, and it was carried out smoothly. Logically speaking, they should have been able to return smoothly. However, Jin Lei and the others still chased after them. Wei Shiping, don't you think that this matter is a little strange?" Wei Shiping's heart beat wildly, and a trace of panic flashed across his eyes. He tried his best to calm himself down and said with a cold face, "Rongxiu, are you doubting me? That Xian formation was built with everyone's strength. If there wasn't a problem somewhere, Jin Lei and the others wouldn't have been able to take advantage of it." Rongxiu's slender white fingers tapped lightly on the armrest of the chair. Then he raised his eyes and looked straight at Wei Shiping. "I'm not doubting you. I'm pointing you out. Rongxiu." Wei Shiping suddenly stood up from his chair, his expression furious. "This matter is of great importance. Don't you dare slander me. I know you don't like me, but with all the elders here, don't you dare try to slander me." He was extremely agitated and his voice was much sharper. No one knew if it was because he was angry or because of some other reason. The elders present were all shocked. They looked back and forth between Rongxiu and Wei Shiping in bewilderment. "Rongxiu, you're saying that Wei Shiping was behind the incident that day?" Elder Shufeng furrowed his brow tightly as he asked anxiously. Actually, he also felt that something was wrong. The Xian formation was almost split open by the golden lightning, but with Rongxiu's help, it was completed successfully. Normally they could completely rely on the Xian formation to shake off the people behind them. But they didn't. At that time, the situation was urgent, and he didn't have time to think about it. But after it was over, every time he thought about it he felt a little strange. It wasn't that he didn't have such suspicions, but because the people who helped were the academy's elders and students, he really didn't want to suspect them. So he subconsciously let it go. Now that he heard Rongxiu's words, he suddenly came back to his senses. "You have to have evidence before you speak." Seeing that the elders present were about to be led astray by Rongxiu, Wei Shiping hurriedly shouted, "Rongxiu, do you have any evidence?" At that time, his movements were extremely subtle, and it was impossible to leave any traces behind. Thinking of this, Wei Shiping sneered. Rongxiu's words had no evidence. He had to take this opportunity to kill him. However, Rongxiu's next sentence made the corner of his mouth curl up suddenly freeze. "Since I dared to say this in front of so many people, I naturally have evidence." Rongxiu smiled faintly and said calmly. Wei Shiping's heart skipped a beat. "Impossible, impossible." He quickly recalled the situation in his mind again, but still couldn't find any problems. "Is Rongxiu tricking me? Okay, then show me the evidence." Wei Shiping shouted fiercely. Rongxiu raised his chin. "The evidence is with you. You can take it." "What?" Wei Shiping was stunned. Rongxiu explained patiently. "At that time, the Xian formation was struck by Jin Lei and was on the verge of breaking. I repaired it with my own strength and completed the Xian formation. As a result, every line on the Xian formation contained my strength." With every word Rongxiu said, Wei Shiping's face turned paler. The reason why Jin Lei and the others could take the opportunity to catch up must be because the Xian formation was damaged. And the ball of strength that was deliberately left behind is still in the body of the person who did it. Wei Shiping's lips trembled slightly. "If you want to prove your innocence, you just have to draw a Xian formation on the spot. See if there is an extra portion of my strength on it." Rongxiu leaned back and looked at him disdainfully as if he was looking at an ant. "Wei Shiping, do you dare?" Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 12-13. Rongxiu finished speaking. The hall was dead silent. Everyone looked at Wei Shiping. As the saint of the Yuntian Tower, Rong Xiu had already cultivated the saint's golden body. Therefore, the force in his body was very special. It was an extremely rare and brilliant gold that was very easy to recognize. Wei Shiping, what do you say? Elder Bo Yen asked in a deep voice. Wei Shiping's back was drenched in cold sweat, almost soaking his inner shirt. His clothes were sticky and stuck to his body, tight and uncomfortable. He opened his mouth and found his voice with great difficulty. I. He suddenly raised his head with a furious expression. This is a humiliation to me. I refuse. However, this move of his was useless against the elders present. Elder Shu Feng sneered. If you refuse, it means that you agree. I just want you to perform a Shen formation. Why is it so difficult? Wei Shiping swallowed his saliva with difficulty and retorted. There were so many people there that day. Anyone could have made a move. Why do you only suspect me? Then we will investigate all of them. Seeing him like this, Elder Shu Feng was even more certain of his suspicions. When he thought of the dangerous situation that day, he was furious. It wasn't easy for them to work together and bring that thing back, but because of Wei Shiping's selfish interests, it led to so much trouble later on. If he was sure that it was Wei Shiping, he would be the first to not let him off. We will start with you. Everyone else will follow suit. Why don't we start with me? At this point, Wei Shiping could no longer refute. He stood there with his hands hanging by his side. His face was pale and his entire body was trembling slightly. In the past few days after returning, he had been busy recuperating from his injuries. He was secretly upset that he did not injure Rong Xiu in this battle. His only consolation was that from now on, Rong Xiu and the Golden Wing sect had completely formed a grudge. Even if it looked calm on the surface, he knew that Jin Minyao was a narrow-minded person. Rong Xiu had killed his most valued disciple in front of everyone. He would definitely not let this matter rest. However, he did not expect that before Jin Minyao could do anything to Rong Xiu would be the first to expose him. Furthermore, it was in front of so many elders of the academy. Everyone present, including the students, was an important figure. His actions were undoubtedly a betrayal of the academy. Once he admitted it, there was no turning back. Countless gazes fell on his body, like incomparably sharp blades, ruthlessly scraping his body, as if they wanted to cut off all the skin and flesh on his body. Only his naked body was Xiu's. It was as if a hand was tightly gripping his heart and blocking his windpipe, making it impossible for him to breathe. In fact, even if he didn't say anything, his reaction at this moment had already surpassed all words. Elder Bo Yen shook his head and sighed. Wei Shiping, do you know what kind of crime it is to betray the academy? I did not. Wei Shiping instinctively retorted. His voice was sharp, but his eyes could not hide his emotions and panic. I really did not. Elder Bo Yen. Master. Please help me say something. It was useless to beg Elder Bo Yen. The only person he could rely on now was his own master, Elder Jiang Lei. However, Elder Jiang Lei was no fool. Now that this matter was obviously done by Wei Shiping, the academy would definitely not let him off easily. Not to mention that his position in the academy was not as high as Elder Bo Yen and the rest, he did not have much authority to speak. Even if he had the authority, he could not speak up for Wei Shiping. It was the fault of a teacher if he did not teach his son well. Previously he was kept in the dark and that was still pardonable. But if he spoke up for Wei Shiping now, that would be deliberately condoning and covering up for him. At that time he would also be implicated. These thoughts quickly flashed through his mind. After weighing the pros and cons, Elder Jiang Lei immediately made a choice. He suddenly stood up and pointed at Wei Shiping with a furious expression. You only have to say if you did this. Have you done anything to betray the academy? Wei Shiping's heart sank. He knew his master the best. Since he said such words, it was obvious that he was on the academy's side. He gritted his teeth and his expression kept changing. Master, even you don't believe me? Elder Jiang Lei flung his sleeves and said coldly, whether I believe you or not depends on the evidence. Now, how do you expect me to believe you? You left the academy for more than a year and rarely came back. How can you hide this from me and do such a thing? Wei Shiping sneered in his heart. Is he completely removing himself from the blame? When something happened to him, his closest master was not thinking about how to protect him, but how to not be implicated. That's enough, Jiang Lei, don't be so angry. Although he is your disciple, his hands and feet are on his body. What he wants to do, you can't always control it, right? Elder Bo Yan's expression was very calm. He raised his hand and signaled Elder Jiang Lei to sit down calmly. Elder Jiang Lei angrily turned his head away with a hint of guilt. Bo Yin, I did not teach my disciple well. I am also responsible for this. This has nothing to do with you. Elder Bo Yin shook his head. If it weren't for Rong Xiu's meticulousness and the fact that he left behind evidence, even I wouldn't have expected him to do such a thing. Just like what you said before, he has already left the academy for quite some time. Even if he really planned something, he wouldn't let you know. Elder Jiang Lei secretly heaved a sigh of relief, but his expression became more and more pained. He held his forehead with one hand and seemed to be very pained. Looks like this matter needs to be reported to Qing Gupa. This sentence finally caused Wei Shiping's tense mind to completely collapse. Elder? He was both shocked and angry as he looked at Elder Bo Yin in disbelief. This is my own matter, why should I? Until now, you still refuse to admit it. Then, in order to not wrongly accuse you, let's invite the people from Qing Gupa to come and investigate together. The Academy and Qing Gupa have always been on good terms. I think they will not find it troublesome. Elder Bo Yin said lightly. Wei Shiping's heart fiercely sank. This was putting him to death. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.